Good morning or good evening or whatever time of the day. Hello, hello, welcome, welcome. Great to see you all. And we're back with another debate dissection where we are doing an autopsy on a pretty old debate, actually. It's Dan Barker, who is absolutely amazing, and Matt Slick, who I've heard is an absolute disaster. Their debating Does God Exist? So yeah, it's going to be a good one. How are you doing, Amber? How are you feeling? How are things suiting you?
Pretty decent today. Just had some adventures so far this weekend, and looking forward to
Hmm.
slicing and dicing a fresh apologist today.
Yeah, yeah. I really want to do a video on pre-sup because I don't see a lot of them out there, and I really want to sort of give like I don't know, like a 5 minute here's guide to pre-sup, like what it's all about. I don't know. I'll think about it a bit more, but I would like to do that because I've debated a lot of pre-sups. I've realized, like a lot of them, like an insane
Mhm.
amount, like more than anybody should. To be
It's
honest with
true.
you, like yeah, yeah,
I mean,
yeah.
one is more than anybody should because there's no point in
That's
debating a
true.
pre-sup.
Well, yeah, they're really well, I mean, apart from, like, the humor value and the,
Yeah.
bewilderingly absurd arguments that come out, I mean, r do you remember the first precept I debated was that, biblically guy? The biblically guy
I don't
back in
categorize.
Amy's?
Technically, he is a pre-sup, but I don't put him
He
in the same
is.
category because he's he's his own thing.
He is his own category. I will say that. I
Mhm.
definitely will say that. You ever had somebody say that I've had sex with Jesus? That's the man for you. I mean, holy crap. That guy. And Australian too. I've got to share a country with that man.
Oh,
Um,
no, oh my.
but yeah, I know. I've got to share a country with biblically guy. I've got to share one with Iron Horse. I've got to share look. Okay, I'm not going to do a comparison on who we've got to share countries with, quite frankly, because
That's yeah, that's that it's
yeah,
a good
yeah,
thing that Australia is a pretty decent sized island. It's
that's
got
that's true. That's true. Yeah, yeah. But yeah. So today we're looking at Matt Slick versus Dan Barker. I'm a big fan of Dan Barker's. He's one of the great debaters of our time. Matt Slick, I've never. Have you ever seen this guy before? I know he's a pre-sup, and I've heard that he's terrible, but I don't know a lot about him apart from that.
I've 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 come across him somewhere, but it's been a while. I can't even remember where precisely.
Okay, I wonder if he has an entry on Rational Wiki.
Hmm.
Um,
Or Irrational Wiki.
or Irrational Wiki. Christian Apologetics and Research Ministry. Yeah, a Masters of Divinity from Westminster Theological Seminary,
A master's
Calvinist
in
tradition.
divinity?
Yeah, apparently so.
So I don't know how familiar you are with the way seminaries do things here in the US.
Uh-huh.
When you enroll, they give you an honorary doctorate of divinity. It's like the welcome present. The fact he has a master's when they just hand out doctorates,
Mm.
I don't whatever.
So is he a presuppositionalist? He seems to be a Calvinist. I'm not 100% sure.
I don't know. I don't recall enough about
Yeah.
him to say. Googling him, Matt Slick, the first suggested result is Matt Slick daughter.
Really?
So
Why?
I don't know. I'll click on it. What the hell? Rachel Slick, Matt Slick, and the critics.
He apparently
Oh, his
is.
daughter left Christianity, and so now he has to make apologetics about why she's not Christian.
Well, I think Matt Slick, if he's a presup, he may think that um, everybody's Christian essentially, which is weird. So if you're unfamiliar with presuppositionalism, one of the things that they do is they say, "Hey, the Bible is inerrant, and because it says that everybody knows the truth of God and they're just suppressing it in their unrighteousness, they take that as literally true." Right? So um that they will sit there and say, no, you do, know that God exists. You're just suppressing it in your own righteousness, which is just wild to be sat there and told what you believe. Just absolutely ridiculous. No, it's definitely possible, Viclet. Definitely possible. But I will get this on the screen, and we probably should start. Give me 1 second.
I kind of want to do the Jeopardy theme, but I'm pretty sure even humming the tune is a copyright violation.
Oh, yeah, don't do that. Please don't sync my stream. Please. So Matt Slick's obviously in the affirmative for this debate. There is a bit of background noise. I'll see how it goes. It isn't too bad while they're talking, but I don't think the sound quality is the best, as you'll find with a lot of these, debates done in some random hall somewhere. Let's have a look, and we will start it off with Matt Slick doing the opening.
All right. Well, I want to thank you for having me here. Really appreciate it. It's been quite a struggle to get here. Canceled flights, delayed flights, but I'm here. So praise God.
Oh,
With
it's a miracle.
Jesus, all things are
It's a miracle.
possible.
There was canceled flight and delayed flights, but I got here, so that's the miracle.
Mhm.
Why did he cancel it? Anyway, you really start to think of, the sort of Texas sharpshooter, that you're sort of counting the hits but ignoring the misses kind of thing,
Mhm.
what? Wow.
All right. Now, tonight's topic, does God exist? All right. Well, I believe he does. But let me make it clear that I'm not arguing for the generic existence of any kind of a God concept, but only the God of the Bible. I am an ordained minister.
Wow,
praise
that's an
Jeebus.
interesting start. That's a very interesting. Usually, especially the pre-suppers, someone like Darth Dawkins will not touch, the Christian God with a 10-foot barge pole, right? They will not go anywhere near it because it is too easy to say, hey, there's not a lot of evidence for it. There's evidence against it, Noah's flood and all of that. So if you're a biblical inerrantist, like apparently this guy is, according to Rational Wiki, how are you going to defend that position? Holy crap. Well, good luck. Usually they'll go for some nebulous, a God must exist in some form somewhere. And it's kind of, you end up arguing about this really nebulous deist kind of concept of a God. And it gets all, a God's got to exist because of intelligibility and just random crap. But he's going for the Christian God. Okay, we got ourselves a debate.
Yep, I'll give him credit for standing on a principle so far.
Yeah.
Who believes in salvation that can be found only through the person and work of Jesus, who, according to the scriptures, is God in flesh, who died on the cross for our sins and rose from the dead 3 days later. Since I believe this, and I take the affirmative position in our debate, then the burden is upon me to at least try and demonstrate that God exists. But in order to do this, I'm not going to do it the wrong way. I won't put on a lab coat. I won't produce a microscope, get an x-ray machine in order to try and detect God's existence through some experimentation, some procedure.
Well, I don't think
why?
anybody is. Well, I mean, yeah, that would be really good. I mean, that would be the right way to do it. I mean, that would be the most effective way to do it, right? Like, so if you had to prove that a God exists, getting scientific proof would be really compelling.
Yeah, like if you can do that, you'll win the debate immediately.
Probably, yeah. There's a Victoria Fest going on in the chat, and I am all for it. I'm 100% on board. I'm ashamed that I don't come from the actual state of Victoria right now, quite frankly, but never mind.
You could move.
I could. It's a long way to move, though. Hey, Pinworm. So, yeah, that's, I think that no one's expecting him to do that, though. We're really more interested in some reasonable demonstration, though. Like, instead of just, what do we get? Assertions, a book says, faith. All of these things are just really poor as evidence. Testimonials. Oh, I was at a, sort of thing, and all of us prayed for something that had happened. This really, really bad evidence. So I did have a criteria of a sort of what makes good evidence, right? So it's sort of repeatability, sort of rigor, that you've covered all explanations, being able to repeat it, anybody sort of reliable. There's a few things that we would put down. I used to have a list of stuff. Really, there's just a few things we would put down as to make good evidence, like sort of if multiple people can do the same thing and come up with the same answer, that's really good evidence. Then everybody gets the same thing. But in this, even the ideas of what God is varies from person to person. So, this is the problem with their kind of evidence. It's all so bad.
Yeah.
That is debatable, Maya. That's debatable. 100% debatable. But thank you.
You're a debater. Like, to you, everything is debatable.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Look, I love a good argument. I really do. But yeah, absolutely. I will be taking the negative. No, do like, do subscribe, and it helps me out a great deal.
Procedures. This is the wrong approach because scientific methodology is designed to detect, repeat, and explain phenomena in the material world, not the world outside of it. It is not designed to detect existence or the existence of a divine person who transcends it.
Well, it describes the natural world, and you get arguments between people whether God is natural or not, kind of thing. And usually most people say that he's not. But yeah, what do you mean it's not designed? I mean, that's weird. That's weird. And the process, it's not just a God. So he's saying transcendent of the natural world. It's not just that, but it's also that it relies on things being falsifiable. It can't investigate anything unfalsifiable, like unable to be falsified. That's, so it has the same chance of investigating a god as it does for investigating fairies. They're not transcendent in any way, but it's unfalsifiable.
Yeah, like, and there's so much to say on this. I'll keep it to just one thing and minimize the tangents. He's already baking his begging the question into the situation. Well, because God is transcendent, we can't detect him. The fact we can't detect him means he's, if he weren't transcendent, we'd find him or something. It just...
Well, then what I would hope he would do is just skip the science part and go directly to the evidence that you have, right?
Yeah.
Like, so we don't necessarily say, hey, you have to have scientific evidence in order to, okay, it would be great, but obviously you don't have it. You're saying you don't have it, then go to the evidence you have. And this is where I find them to be lacking. They'll say, oh, you can't investigate it scientifically. It's like, well, then what do you got? Because if you cannot confirm the existence of God, then how do you know that he exists or she exists?
Think about it. Do you know of any person who behaves in a mechanistic, naturalistic, predictable fashion? Because God is a person. Or are there aspects of irregularity, unpredictability, and variableness in their behavior due to them being persons that don't fit in the scientific method? Let me just tell you, going to the scientific method to try and find God is the wrong approach. In my article on my website, carm.org, what kind of evidence should we expect from a transcendent God? I say, quote, since a transcendent God who created the universe would not be limited to it, but would transcend it, then we can expect that evidence for God's existence would share transcendent characteristics. Close quote. Therefore, if we encounter transcendent characteristics in the world, then we have encountered evidence for God's existence. I'll propose just such evidence in a bit, but before I do that, I need to make a comment.
Well, isn't that affirming the consequent? Like it's sort of like, well, if if there's a God, we would expect to see this. We see this, and therefore a God exists, kind of thing. It's like saying, what was my example? If a cat is in a fight, we would expect to see scratches. We see scratches, therefore the cat was in a fight. But that's not the only way to get scratches. So, it could have fallen in a bush. It could have been scraped by a tree. It could have had all kinds of things happen to it. It doesn't necessarily mean that that's the case. So, and I wonder how he's using these transcendent things. Because transcendence, the ones he's talking about, usually theists are referring to morality or intelligibility or logic and things like that. But I think they're transcendent of just concrete and abstract. It transcends from material to imagination, essentially. They're sort of models that we make in our heads. So I don't see, like, he's basically begging the question that transcendentals are from God in the first place, that they somehow transcend physical reality in the first place.
Yeah, that really caught my attention when I forget how he phrased it, but it's very much like what you said. If there's scratch marks, it must have been a cat fight. No.
No.
No. When you're throwing out fallacies in the first 30 seconds, holy shit.
It's a bit of a worry, yeah. So affirming the consequent is that one. So basically you're saying, hey, if there is if there's a car accident, we would expect to see rubber marks, tire marks on the road. There's tire marks on the road, therefore there was a car accident. Well, wait, not necessarily. Someone could have done a doughy or something, like someone could have done a burnout on the road. It doesn't necessarily mean there's an accident. And this is a sort of fatal flaw that they often go into. If there's a God, we would expect to see complexity. There's complexity, therefore it has to be a God. Well, wait, no, there's other ways complexity can come about. Hold your horses there.
Mm-hmm. It's the opposite of science in that respect, because science will be like, okay, here's one possible explanation. Now let's try like hell to show that we're wrong, or at least cast some doubt on this possibility. Right. And it's the other way around. It's saying, oh, I have an explanation, therefore it must be right. And all other possible explanations are therefore automatically wrong.
Well, it's the opposite of affirming the antecedent, which basically sort of says, if there is an accident, we would expect to see tire marks. There's no tire marks, therefore there wasn't an accident, right? That one actually works, right? Because it's basically, if there's if a cat has scratches, if a cat's in a fight, then it would have scratches. The cat has scratches. Sorry, the cat doesn't have scratches, therefore it wasn't in a fight. That one actually works, right? That makes logical sense. The other one doesn't. So it's just a slight, and sort of, so going to the negative is really what science does. Basically say, hey, if this is the case, we should expect to see this. Try to falsify it and not find it. We don't find it, therefore that hypothesis is shot down.
And the really funny thing about that is exactly how we demonstrate that there isn't the kind of God that he suggests. Because if there were a omni whatever the hell, or maximally loving God or whatever, then we wouldn't expect to see this, and this, and we see those things. So yeah, that's
basically the problem of evil you've just described. If a God is omnipotent, and omnibenevolent, then we shouldn't see these natural disasters destroy everybody, but we do. So it's sort of, and that's why it's such a big problem for theists. And, don't listen to them. It still is a big problem. Don't listen to what they've said. Oh, we've solved it. Really? You have? Wow. Okay. I must have missed the memo, because they haven't explained. The best they can do is like William Lane Craig saying, well, it was good for those children to be slaughtered mercilessly. Thanks, Craig. Thanks, Dr. Craig.
Yeah.
Real moral guy.
Super moral.
Yeah. We find what we're looking for. And our presuppositions determine what we look for, how we look, and how we interpret what we find. Our presuppositions can blind us, or they can help us see.
Look, so the idea behind presuppositions is you want to keep them as minimal as possible to account for things, but not make sweeping generalizations. Like, if you come into your house and you see that it's empty and your wife is not there. Well, you could presuppose she went out. Okay, that's the bare minimum you could do. You know, that's a relatively small presupposition. But if you presuppose she went out to the mall to meet a friend, and the friend has a dress and red hair, you know, like, you know, we try not to make those presuppositions, because they will, you know, if that presupposition is wrong, everything built upon it is going to be wrong. And I think that's important to say. If your presuppositions are wrong, everything downstream from it is wrong. So I'd love to hear what these presuppositions are, and how, and why he has to make them, and why he has to go there. Because a lot of the time I feel like these presuppositions are based upon nothing but, I want to find there's a God, so I'm going to presuppose there's a God. It's sort of, yes. But say, oh, that our presuppositions can blind us, or they can, you know, I suppose your presuppositions aren't the blinding sort, Matt. That's really what we're talking about. Your presuppositions are the good kind. Everyone else's are bad. Yeah. She was abducted by aliens. Well, yeah. No, I gotcha.
Therefore, when assessing God's existence, a person's presuppositions need to be examined for consistency, rationality, and accuracy. But that is a topic for another time. I'd love to discuss that.
Oh, I bet you would.
Presuppositions form a worldview, and in our debate tonight, we have two worldviews to work from. We have the one that contains God and the worldview that does not contain God. We could say that there is a worldview that contains transcendence and one that does not.
Okay, so I feel like a shifting of the burden of proof is going to come. Like, oh, this, you know, you think, so this is what Darth Dawkins essentially does. He basically says, you believe that there's a not God world, therefore you've got to prove it. And it's like, no, that's not how this works. You're claiming there's a God, you've got to demonstrate that God. It's just a shift. It's a tactic as old as time, especially when you're talking about something unfalsifiable. You're basically going, there's this mystery thing that cannot possibly be falsified, but in order to show it doesn't exist, you've got to falsify the unfalsifiable. No, that's not how that works.
Yeah, it's need a miracle and therefore prove miracles or something. No,
Yeah.
You're probably not wrong, but I see this as being shaping up into a straw man type situation. You know, we've got a God world and a not God world. Well, what do you mean by that? Are we taking, say, Islam, for example? Does that count as a God world because there's a God, even though it's not the God that you specifically said you're going to defend exclusively? Or does it go in the not God world because it's not your God? What are we doing here? And are we trying to take like Christianity versus the world, or are we trying to like suck the world into Christianity and then single out the exceptions, the weirdos who aren't logical and just accept our presuppositions?
Interesting. I'm going to do a poll. What is coming, people? Is it going to be shifting the burden of proof? Is it going to be the old straw man, or is it going to be both? I think I know how people will
Why
vote,
not both?
Why not both? Like, if you're in for a penny, you're in for a pound. Let's do it. Certain Matt Slick, a certain friend of mine, should chime in at some point. I don't know who that is. Wait, you have friends? I'm joking. Unfinished journey. I'm joking. I'm not sure who your friend is though.
Oh yeah, Journey has a couple of friends who follow around. Of course, you'll recognize my unfinished sock.
Yes.
There's a second sock.
Really? I thought they got lost in the wash. Oh,
yeah,
well,
it did, but you know.
Jake has said you just wrapped up your daughter's birthday. Happy birthday to your daughter, Jake. That's awesome.
Hey, Jake.
Howdy. Yeah, happy birthday. Get some happy birthdays in the chat for Jake's daughter.
Ooh, is there cake? Never mind, I can't have cake. Too many.
Yeah, the poll is 100% going to be. Oh no, someone said shifting burden of proof. Somebody actually agrees with me. You fools!
What have you done?
You fools! You agree with me, you fools! All right, I'm going to end the poll because it's sitting there. Okay, let's see what we got.
If you're an atheist, then your worldview necessarily excludes God, as well as any transcendent qualities he might possess, such as his independence of the universe and his being beyond space and time. As an atheist, you must exclude the transcendent characteristics because they are, by definition, independent of the natural realm. But if we can discover transcendent characteristics in the universe, then it would seem we've discovered evidence for God's existence. Then interpreting that evidence would depend on your presuppositions. Now, I believe, again, I want to say this, I believe we have encountered transcendent characteristics in our world, and that the Christian worldview, not the atheistic perspective, best accounts for them. Okay, so let me introduce to you a pair of opposites, God and not God.
Dichotomy. It's a
Sorry?
completely different tactic. It's
Really?
I mean, he'll probably do those things also at some point, but what he's been setting up here, and he appears to be trying to bring to flower with some Miracle Grow, is our old friend, the black and white fallacy. He's saying it's either the Christian worldview or the atheist worldview. There
Yeah,
are
that
no
doesn't
Muslims,
follow, yeah.
Hindus,
Yeah.
Zen, Buddha, whatever you've got. Nope, just Christians and atheists. That's all there is.
I feel like he accepted this debate on, like, I feel like he wants to debate a nebulous kind of deist god, just a concept of any god whatsoever, because that's where his arguments are leading, because that would be a true dichotomy, right? A god or not God. And that's, he's saying he's arguing the Christian God, but he's gone to God and not God.
Oh,
So
he's just going to claim credit for anything vaguely God-shaped, therefore
I
the
presume
God. Just jump right to the
so.
end. Mm.
I'm gonna love to hear these transcendentals that he thinks are so magical kind of thing, and they're like, morality. Like, it's gonna be weird.
There is no third option in this set because there's either the thing or the negation of the thing. Excuse me.
Well, he's right that there is either the Christian God or not the Christian God, but that doesn't exclude any like transcendentals that came from, Allah or Brahma or any other like transcendental farting pixies kind of thing. It doesn't exclude any other origin for them. So I don't know why. Yeah.
Fighting ahead, Gold. My apologies. We have the thing and the negation of the thing, God or not God. Furthermore, if there are multiple gods, then there's at least a God. In this antonymic pair, antonyms are opposites, we only have two options that can have explanatory power. For example, we can say that God created the universe or God did not create the universe. Both cannot be true, but at least one of them must be.
Well,
now we can apply this principle.
This is like basic. I think everybody understands this. But like, we want to get to why you think it was a god. That, like, you're basically explaining, hey, there's only two possibilities. Yeah, everyone gets it. Why is it yours? Wow. No, even God doesn't like Matt Slick, apparently. Although that is Thor, and Thor doesn't like people that don't drink mead, I must admit. So, I don't know if Matt Slick drinks mead. I'll be honest. I'll be 100% honest. I don't know.
No idea. Maybe
Yeah.
it's Slick Mead. I feel like he should have like different hair for a guy named Slick, but maybe that's nominative determinism. Yeah, he seems to be doing that apologist thing where they burn the clock explaining the elementary school level basics of logic. Like,
Yeah.
we know. Get to your point.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know whether, sort of people are aware of this, but I'd expect him to move on, sort of, okay, yeah, it's a true dichotomy. Either God created the universe or God, didn't create the universe. There is either a God or there is not a God. Okay, yep, cool. Does he belabor this point, or does he actually move on to say why it is God? Because it feels like he's really... I still want to say, I think he is setting it up to say, like, if you think it's not God, you've got to show that it's not God. And that is not how burden of proof works. But, I don't know. I'm suspicious. Dodgy Slick. Some might say an oil slick.
here in the debate. God either exists or God does not exist. And if we can demonstrate that the no God position is incapable of explaining transcendent characteristics that relate to human experience, then the only other option must be validated, namely that God exists. Furthermore, just to clarify, to have a lack of belief in God.
For sake.
How is he gonna so that basically if say materialism doesn't have an explanation for something, then it's God.
We're gonna incredulity this bitch. We're gonna be like, oh, you
Yeah.
can't explain why 2 and 2 makes 4? Boom, therefore God, bitches.
Right. Wow.
Where did the Big Bang come from? Tough guy.
Yeah. My bang's bigger than your bang. What? Like, and plus explaining something and claiming a reason for it are two totally different things. Because even if, say, something like math, for instance, is a transcendental, it's basically some way created by God to describe the universe or something like that, you're not explaining how it was put into place. You're just saying God done it. That's it. That's not an explanation.
You're saying magic, but instead of saying, quantum hand wavy, you're saying it was a very specific magic, and I know the magician. It was this guy, and I know the guy. I'm dating the guy. In fact, don't tell my wife. I'm dating the guy. He hates shellfish. Don't plant your crops next to each other when he's around because he gets a little
smitey. Don't mix your threads. Don't mix fabrics. Hate that.
Only a real guy would have such strong preferences, right?
Yeah, right. But I mean, this is the thing. Like, it's never an explanation. It just is it's just saying, hey, it's a mysterious figure. Well, that's not an explanation, sir. That is just a excuse as to why you cannot have an explanation, because it's literally unknowable to you.
Falls in the category of the no God position, since it is identical with it in explanatory power. Now, Mr. Barker, I like Dan. I almost consider my friend. We've talked lately and been on my radio show a few weeks ago. He's a nice guy, so here we go. You said in your debate with Doug Wilson in 1997 on the topic,
1997? I wonder when this came out. But yeah, I always feel suspicious when they bring up stuff from previous debates. It's like, seriously, you should be addressing his arguments in his introduction, not like arguments made sometime before. We'll see what he's got to say, but Dan Barker's usually pretty consistent about what he says. Pretty damn consistent. So maybe he'll be charitable. I don't know why I said that.
Silly Mark.
The triune God exists. That quote, logic is not some capital L thing existing up in the universe we need to find. It is just a function of the mind, a function of the human brain, close quote. Well, I agree that logic is a function of the brain, but not just the brain. We both know that people can reason correctly. But how would you recognize correct reasoning if not by appealing to something outside the brain, such as the laws of logic, which guide proper reasoning? But these laws cannot be the product of the human brain. Otherwise, there is no way to determine if a person's reasoning is right or wrong.
What does he think that the freaking Aristotle was wandering in the desert for 40 days and found these stone tablets with the laws of logic already inscribed on them in Greek? Of course, they're the product of a human brain.
Well, yeah. I mean, he's talking about the way that the universe works in an orderly way, but I don't think that's the laws of logic. I think the laws of logic are a set. They're like the laws of physics, like there's the way the universe operates, and then we have our physics equations, which aren't the things themselves. They're just descriptions of them. It's like if somebody uses the correct word and we say, well, the words just mean made up in your head. And it's like, yes, but one will be the correct one. Well, yeah, that's true. So they must be out there somewhere. Like, does that follow at all? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's a normative thing.
Yeah, it's like saying, money. Here in the US, our dollar bills look a certain way. In Australia, the dollar looks however it looks over there. They're both $1, but which one works in each place is context dependent based on the agreement of human minds. There's no objective, external, transcendent reality behind it.
Which is a normative thing. It's just what people sort of agree on. And so these laws of logic, I mean, there's other systems of philosophy like process philosophy and process ontology, which sort of doesn't use the laws of logic. I think they're really great for describing things, but like all models, they're inaccurate. But they're very, very useful in describing things. But I think there's better ways to describe things than through the laws of logic, such as process. Because everything is constantly changing. They don't have these solid, static properties that are unchanging. That's sort of, but a lot of our thinking is colored by the Aristotelian laws of logic that he came up with. And they're very useful for describing things and thinking about things, but we don't think that these laws are out written in the universe by a deity somewhere. They're just descriptions of how the universe works. And so trying to explain this to people, they sort of go, oh, but, you know, they're true and correct. And it's like, yeah, but how accurate are they? We don't know. Right? There seems to be, like, you know, in quantum physics, it may be the case that the law of excluded middle can be broken. Something can have a superposition of being not true or false, but both true and false kind of have another position. It's difficult.
Yeah, there's always interesting edge cases and peculiar situations. And apropos of absolutely nothing, do y'all know what Australian dollars look like? They are colorful AF.
Oh yeah. They're also made of a polyfiber that basically, like, you can't tear them, and that you can put them in the wash and they'll wash and then come out exactly the same as they were
Ooh, that's
before.
handy.
They're like plastic. It's like Canadian dollars. Canadians got the sort of thing to do their dollars off us, their notes off us.
Espionage.
No, we just, you know, shared it with them because they're a Commonwealth person and they're not like batshit and insane like the US. So,
Well,
you know. Yeah. No, they're very good. They're almost impossible to forge, and like I said, you can put like a whole ton of them in the wash, and they'll just come out fine.
You literally launder your money.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
When the brain functions logically, it must be in harmony with the laws of logic. When the brain functions illogically, then it is not in harmony with those laws. But those laws are external to and independent of the brain, since they govern it in regard to proper reasoning. Furthermore, the laws of logic.
I don't think they govern it. I think that when the when you're using the laws of logic, it's because that's in concordance with you know, the reality of the universe. So it's like saying when your brain functions properly, you'll be using the laws of physics properly, right? The thing that tethers it to a concrete or a real thing is the fact that it's describing real things. Now you can like use Newton's laws on gravity to make perfectly reasonable calculations, but we know they're not as accurate as Einsteinian theory of gravity, right? So does that mean that we should just dump the Newtonian? No, it's still very useful. And that's how I see the laws of logic. They might not be the most accurate, but they're still incredibly useful. So this is sort of the case that you could make about the laws of logic. You could also make about the laws of physics. That the laws of physics are just, you know, in the mind, so they must be transcendental to something. No, we just made them up to describe what is happening. And no model is completely accurate, but some are really useful.
Mm-hmm. There's a famous quote that Forrest brings up often that goes along those lines. It's all of our models are wrong, but some of them are useful.
Yeah. And so I think that sort of in reading lately, I'm like, well, there's probably better ways to describe logic in the universe, like the logical systematic working of the universe, but I'm not even sure we've got the language to do so. Because really, and what I've been reading about is sort of when you consider something, right, like just say you have me there, okay, it's kind of, if you extend temporal dimensions, you don't really have one object with all of these properties. You have a field that is changing over time from one end to the other, and it's kind of a wild way to think that there's no such thing as just a static object like the laws of logic kind of describe, but rather it is sort of the what are called spatiotemporal path of something and its relationship with everything around it. Really wild way of describing stuff. But do we even have the language to do it is the question. Not really at the moment. So the laws of logic are pretty good for describing the universe, but that doesn't mean they're supernatural or cosmically dictated. No. And just because they're made up in the human mind doesn't mean they're not accurately enough describing the behavior of the universe.
Lawbreakers will be imprisoned. You've broken the laws of logic. I'm exiling you to Australia.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, come along. We don't believe in logic over here.
Are special kinds of propositions, since they are about truth. And that's one reason we know they require a mind, because no material thing can be about another thing. Truth statements require minds. Excuse me, I'm having a real hard time here.
We can tell, Matt.
Yeah, we can tell. Yeah, you don't seem to be doing too well at all. But logic, so these truth statements require minds. Yeah, I would agree with that. But when you truth really only sort of gets leveraged on propositions, right? When you say, you make some sort of statement about the world, like, I am in my study, right? That's either going to be a true or a false statement about the world. I don't, but I think when I talk about transcendence, I'm talking about things that transcend between the human mind or a mind and the real world. So, for instance, when you have, say, laws of physics, they're made up in the human mind, but they're describing the real world. They can be applied to the real world. We kind of call them pseudo-concretes because, something like math, well, it looks like a concrete. It kind of acts like a concrete, but it's not. It's just a made-up language to describe the world around us. So, I don't know. I don't know. He's kind of just saying, hey, all of these things that require minds, well, is he trying to say that because logic is out in the world somewhere as a thing, it requires a mind? Is that what he's trying to say? I've kind of lost his train of thought.
Well, he is having a hard time. It seems something like that. Like he's to break down his case. In order to decide something is true, you have to be able to take the conception of it and then compare it against the reality and determine if it's close enough of a match to say, yes, this is a true description. And that requires a mind to do the evaluating and the deciding and so forth. So he could be leaning in that direction, that they must have come from a mind in the first place, and therefore there must be since the universe obeyed the laws of logic before there were humans, it must be something outside of time.
Right.
Probably, maybe.
Possibly, maybe, yeah. Who knows? Wow.
Sorry.
Oh, you will be sorry, Matt.
I'm fighting a bad head cold. What's that? A what? I couldn't hear you.
Laying on of hands for prayer. Should I try it?
We try the mockery later.
What? I thought that was quite humorous. Like, he's trying to help you out while you're blathering up there, Matt. Just accept the help, mate. Like, seriously, wow.
You can tell. It's so wild. So most everybody knows, but for future people who may not, Dan Barker was a preacher for decades, and he was very good at it. He's very engaging.
Yes.
He's a musical person. He's an entertainer type person. He knows how to keep a crowd lighthearted, engaged, interested, positive, etc. Matt is also theoretically a preacher. He runs an apologetics ministry, the Apologetics and Research Center, it's called.
Oh, boy.
He's not so good with crowds, though.
No. He seems to be like one of these people that take themselves insanely seriously, you know, sort of, I don't know. I'm just getting a weird vibe from him that he's sort of, you know, very, very, very serious. Like, I don't know. Weird.
I speak in public all the time. It's not nerves. I'm actually having trouble with a head cold. My apologies. All right. So the first 4 laws of classical logic are: 1, the law of identity, which states that something is what it is and is not what it is not. The law of non-contradiction, which says that a statement cannot be both true and false in the same time at the same sense.
Well,
the law of exclusion.
I mean, yes, but there's more than that to it. It's a contradiction cannot exist in whole or in part in reality. There's more entailments, like 2 truths cannot contradict.
Right.
Because if they're both true, if one thing is true and it's exclusive to the other, then the other cannot be true. And if you're not sure which one is which, then only one of them can be true. That sort of thing.
Yeah, and it's sort of it mostly refers to propositions, actually, that it can't be true and false at the same time. Like, so any property, any proposition at all, it can't be true and false at the same time. And then you have the third one, but we'll let him get into the third one. It's like,
That's interesting.
I think,
because if a proposition could be both true and false at the same time, that rule itself being a proposition would be both true and false at the same time.
Well, true. Yeah. Yeah. But I don't think these laws of logic are these transcendentals, as he's referring to them. I think they're just descriptions of how the universe works. That and sort of precepts have kind of gone, oh, where do they come from? How do they work? And to the best we know, what makes something something is the way that it excitations in quantum fields work. Now, I'm not a quantum physicist, but that's to the best of our knowledge how it works. What makes, say, a carbon molecule where it is and why it is that molecule and not another molecule seems down to the specific way, the location, the makeup of these quantum particles. That's about it. That's about all we know.
Yeah, that's been a thing I've been wondering since I did my very first chemistry course. I say, well, what is it that makes, you know, we talk about the different atoms and how they have different properties, and we've studied the properties and what those properties are, and that's all fascinating and wonderful. But like, what makes carbon different from lithium other than the number of protons? Like, what properties are conveyed by the extra how does it change the properties? We don't freaking know yet.
Yeah. And there's physicists that know way more than us, you know, about how they work, but that's the furthest I've been able to understand it, that it is just sort of excitations in this quantum field that cause them to be like how they are. So it's like, and that sort of ties into what I've been reading about process philosophy. It's more about relative sort of energy density and positioning than it is about these properties we think are real. And it gets sort of wild, because it's kind of like, well, you know, we use these shorthands to describe them, but really what we're describing is sort of a snapshot along a temporal line, right? We're describing the thing as it is with one snapshot. And it could be said that by the time you describe it again, that some of the properties, like tiny micro properties, have changed, which is just interesting, you know, and it sort of says, hey, these laws may not be what we think they are. So I think that just like the laws of physics, they're abstractions that we've essentially made up to describe how the universe works. Are they the most accurate? We don't know. We
Yeah.
just don't know.
It's a practical utility thing. It's like that
Yeah.
old saying from the days of yore, that no man can cross the same river twice, because even if you
Yes.
turn around and go right back, you're a
Mhm.
slightly different person, and the water in the river has changed. It's moved. It's caught on. So it's a different puddle of water at this point. It's broadly true, you know, but
Mm.
you could still, either way, you could still build a bridge. Like, for practical purposes, you don't have to split it
Mm.
that fine. Same sort of thing that we could probably find if we devoted our lives to investigating new emergent properties entailed by the laws of logic. We could probably find some very niche edge cases and go, ha 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 ha.
Mm.
But it doesn't actually matter. The description, it's a description. It's for utility purposes. It works.
Well, it's interesting you bring up water, because someone was sort of saying, hey, like, we sort of describe these things as individual things, but it may be that sort of the universe is just one thing. So, you know, you can describe a wave and say it has these properties and these, you know, it's X tall and it has this curvature on the wave kind of thing, like with water, but that's not what it is, right? That is just a something that we're making up, that the wave doesn't actually have those properties. It is just water molecules. Like,
Yeah.
these properties are something that we've made up to describe it, but they don't really describe it, because, you know, its description is only meaningful to us, and is
Yeah.
instead made of a ton of water molecules all working in tandem. So that might be the entire universe, that it's just one thing, and what we're describing is just like a wave, fluctuations of energy and quantum fields inside of it. And we think
Emergent
they're just
properties.
right, emergent properties, and we think that they're one thing over here, and maybe it's not. Like, this is the thing, and I don't claim to know the answers to these things, but somebody is.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Middle, which says that the statement is either true or false. Man, I'm having trouble. And the law of proper inference, which states if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C. I don't know if you're familiar with these laws. You cannot have rational discourse without them. There are other laws, but these four laws.
You can. That's how we worked out that those laws are laws. Is you can.
Mm-hmm.
We went, hey, if we do it this way, everything makes so much more sense and works better. So let's do it this way.
Well, I think there's some things you intuitively gather, like, you know, as you work in the universe, you will start to describe things as, you know, individual things, right? Like, you will start to go, okay, that's an apple, it has these properties. But what you've got to remember is that we're not inherently born with that knowledge.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, babies, they don't consider themselves different from their mother to start off with. They think that they're the same thing. Like, their self-identity is not sort of fully matured yet. So they sort of see their mother and them as one thing. So it's really fascinating that we have to learn that, hey, that's separate from me. We don't automatically come out like that. That and stuff like object permanence. Like, that when something goes away, it hasn't just vanished, like completely vanished from the universe kind of thing. We have to learn that, which is just fascinating.
Yeah, in a way, we have to outgrow solipsism.
Basically, yeah.
Must be held to, or you cannot have rational discourse. How does the atheistic perspective account for these laws? If the laws of logic are just functions of the human brain, as Mr. Barker stated, then that explanation cannot work, because brains are different and people contradict each other. Furthermore, if someone's physical brain causes him to deny the law of non-contradiction, that law is not invalidated. It's still true. Therefore, this proves that the logical thinking occurs in the brain, and that laws of logic do not depend upon human brains for their validity.
But that's like saying, if I deny that Newton's laws are the best for describing gravity and go for Einsteinian instead, then gravity just doesn't stop working. Yeah, no joke. What are you talking about?
It also there's a little bit of a, I'm not sure yet if it's goalpost shifting, moving the burden, one of those things. But the way he's saying, I'm curious how the atheists describe yada yada yada.
Right.
How do you? Because your holy book, no commandments about no prediction
you're breaking
that
up a
we
bit,
would.
Ember.
It's not in there, so it's not from your side either.
Right. Like, just calling something transcendental and God did it is not an explanation for it. It's not even an explanation as to why the universe is this way and not another way, except saying, well, God's mysterious, he decided it would be this way. It doesn't explain it. But we can explain it with, hey, these laws of logic, like the universe operates in a certain way, and maybe that's the only way universes can work. Problem is, we don't have any other universes to check on.
Yet.
We don't know yet, right? So could there be a universe where the law of non-contradiction isn't a thing? Maybe. I don't know. It'd be very weird to me, but I come from this universe. But just because there's these laws of logic that we have sort of created to describe them, just like mathematical functions describe how the universe works, doesn't mean they are somehow supernaturally gifted upon the universe by some god. No.
If these logical laws are agreed upon principles that people recognize as true, then they are recognizing principles that already exist. But how is it possible to have pre-existent logical propositions in an atheistic worldview? And if it is people who declare these axioms to be true, then do the logical propositions become untrue when people decide they don't serve their subjective wants anymore?
No. Just like when the laws of physics don't, the universe still operates the same. There'll still be gravity whether or not people decide gravity, the gravitational theorems of Einstein aren't true.
The street out past my house here has a speed limit of 30 miles an hour. If I and my housemates decide that that's not true, will it change the speed limit? Obviously not. The police are still going to give us tickets. So Therefore, they are transcendent properties that must have come down from on high.
But be careful with that one, because what he would say is, look, there was a mind that set up that speed limit kind of thing. But what you've got to remember about things like the laws of physics, laws of nature, laws of logic, is that you can't violate them. They're not like a speed limit law. They're not prescriptive, which means that law basically says if you exceed 30 miles per hour, I think you said, you will get $100 fine or whatever you get for it, kind of thing. That's a prescriptive law. They're not the same as the laws of nature, which are sort of constraints on how they physically operate. It's interesting, because I wonder if he thinks they're universal, because couldn't God just break those laws anytime he wanted? Or does he have to abide by those laws? Well, if he has to abide by those laws, then he's not omnipotent. There's something still governing his behavior. If he can break them at any time, then they're not laws. They're just suggestions.
Yeah. So either way, it doesn't work.
But please do show that these things come from a God. You basically said, hey, we can't explain where they come from. Well, just saying, hey, they're natural properties of the universe is explaining where they come from. The universe formed with these properties. That is at the same level of depth as his explanation. It is, because you said God decided to make it this way. Well, I can say the universe formed naturally with these laws inherent to them.
Actually, yours is slightly better because you have a grounding, the thing you're connecting it to as the reason for it is a thing we can demonstrate exists.
Yes. Yep. Yeah, and you might say, oh, but, God did at the start of the universe. Okay, we'll prove that. Okay, I don't know why the universe formed, but you don't know why God made them the way they are.
If these laws of logic are descriptions of natural phenomena, then how do you, for example, observe the law of proper inference in nature, which says if A equals B and B equals C, then A equals C, without first presupposing the validity of the laws of logic which you use to deduce its truth? To do so is to beg the question.
Really? Begging the question. You're accusing us of begging the question where you're like, these laws of logic come from God. Okay. Wow.
No self-awareness, or at least
None.
he presupposes that the audience won't catch on to what he's doing.
Yeah.
If these laws of logic are said to be properties of the universe, then they should be measurable, since properties of the physical realm are quantifiable, whether they be things such as hardness, mass, polarity, or density. But you cannot apply this to the laws of logic. Furthermore, these laws of logic are characteristics.
What? Why not? Why not?
Because God said no.
Because, like, when you get down to the law of identity, all the properties are physical properties. You don't have, spiritual, the spiritual side of an apple. Maybe you do. Who knows? There was a magic apple in the garden. Who knows? Maybe you do.
Sometimes they're spiritual apples.
Why aren't they just the same as sort of physics laws and not like density or gravity? Why? I don't understand.
They contain universality. They're true for everyone all the time. If you don't agree with the law of logic, the law of non-contradiction, it doesn't make it go away.
Yeah, but the law of gravitational attraction is true for everyone all the time. And that was made up. That's just something that we put down again to describe how the universe works. It doesn't, that's a unit. The speed of light in a vacuum is a universal. It's always that speed all the time under that but here's the thing. I mean, I don't think universals really exist. I think they're just labels that we put on things. So is that true all the time? Well, when you get into quantum physics, it may not be. That's why there's quantum logic. There's a different version of logic down on that level. Does he know there's different logical systems? He probably doesn't. He probably thinks this is the only one, right?
He only has a master's.
Yeah.
It's
a master's in theology as well, or something like that.
Divinity, which is like the most useless for whatever. It's fine. I mean, as you know, I'm a minister myself. I also have a doctorate in divinity, which is how I know they hand it to you like on day one. But
right.
For fuck's sake.
Wow.
But it's wild. Gravity, right? He would probably say gravity is a law of the universe, and it's a property that comes from the great beyond and therefore God. What if I told you gravity is also a human contrived model and it doesn't actually exist? When you get down to the most basic level, what we see happening is that matter creates a slight drag on space-time, and that drag basically creates a down direction, and shit falls. There is no actual attraction at distance.
Right.
It's a drag in the fabric of space and time. And whatever. We're not gonna. Matt's over explaining basic concepts. I'm not gonna do a lecture on freaking advanced physics.
Right. Well,
just to make the point,
It's just in our models, the way we describe stuff may not actually be what's happening, and they're just a simplified form, right? So it's simplified form to say, hey, there's this, law of gravitational attraction, and these two masses will attract one another. Yeah, that's not actually what's happening, but we're describing what we see. And I don't see the laws of logic as any different. Like, I think we're just describing what we actually experience in the real world. And you're somehow calling them transcendent for reasons that I have no idea why.
Objective reasons.
Yeah.
Because
we know that people contradict them. Themselves, we know they're just wrong. But these laws are there. They're not just a function of the brain. And they have a universality to them. They have a quality that applies to everyone all the time. They transcend space and time.
Well, they transcend space and time.
I mean, the speed limit out front transcends space. Like, what do you mean?
Don't know. This is so weird because even if they are properties of the universe and we've got descriptions of them, then they don't transcend space. They don't transcend our universe. They're just a property of the universe. They don't like you have to show it transcends space and time. Because if there's no time and no space, I don't know how anything can actually exist at all. So how can there be a law of identity? I don't know.
Yeah, what does to exist mean other than having a location within space and time?
Right. So how can there be anything to have a law of identity without, but you're not going to explain it, are you? But transcend means that they go above space and time, and I don't what? So weird. It's almost like he thinks that because something's universal and applies throughout the universe exactly the same, that's transcending space and time. But transcendence isn't that it's consistent across the entire universe. It's that without space and time, they still apply. And I'd love to see him demonstrate that one.
It'd be pretty neat.
Right.
So let's take a field trip to outside the universe and see if, you know, the law of gravity still works. Or the speed of light.
Did you know that I exist not just in one spot in space and not just at one time? So I transcend space and time. Did you know that?
That's true, actually. I mean, we've observed you. This is what, something like the 100th or so episode of these debate reviews. So we've observed you existing at 100 or so different space-time coordinates.
Yeah.
You're very transcendent.
I know.
They have a transcendent characteristic.
Could you feel free to transcend my like button? There you go.
Nice. Very smooth.
Now, what worldview best provides the rational justification for these transcendent universal truths? If it is, oh man.
Drink some Dayquil, Matt. Fuck.
So I feel like I'm justified in saying that he's shifting the burden of proof. He's basically said that these transcendentals, as he calls them, so, you know, logic, morality, whatever he's appealing to, come from a god. Instead of showing that they come from a god, he's like, you've got to account for them. Like, you've got to show where they come from. No, you've got to show they come from a god, sir. That's what you've got to do.
Yeah, they come from me. Prove they don't, Matt.
Right, and that would be shifting the burden of proof because you're claiming they come from you. So, you know, it's up to you to prove it. Like, this is just shifting the burden of proof. That's all it is.
Is it the Christian worldview that proposes a transcendent mind that is the Christian God and who has revealed these universally true laws, which are reflections of his perfect transcendent mind? Or are they the product of human?
True. Like, that may be Matt's worldview, which includes Christianity, but I don't think it's correct to say it's the Christian worldview, because there's a lot of things that Christians don't agree on. And if it's not in the Bible, there's definitely some Christians who disagree on the thing. And there's nothing in the Bible about transcendent, this, that, beyond space-time, ephemeral, spaceless, timeless, immaterial being of perfect nature. None of that is biblical. It's all doctrine.
Yeah, I don't really remember anything in the Bible about the laws of logic. You know, like and it's really weird. The last time I heard a precept talk about, they were like, "Oh, there's 3 main laws of logic. There's a Father, a Son, and a Holy Ghost. Coincidence? I think not." And it's like, are you serious right now?
Just like there are 3 states of matter, mostly, give or take. Plus or minus a few.
Yeah. Coincidence? I think not.
And there are 3-ish atomic particles, the proton and the neutron and the electron, and never mind all the others that we don't. No, just the main ones.
Just the 3. Fuck.
Brain action via evolution that assigns universal truth principles in the physical world and asserts them as a function of the physical brain. I assert that it's the former, which makes sense, and the atheistic perspective does not and cannot. Now,
Why can't it? Like, this is just a bold-faced assertion. It's just baseless assertion. It cannot make sense. No, no, a nominalist approach to it can make sense. Yes, it does.
Yeah, I prophesy that Dan will shred that one, because we see Dan making notes over there. So he's
of course.
gonna see that. He's gonna write that down.
Oh, yeah.
He says an atheist can't explain it. All I have to do is present one explanation.
Yep.
And Matt's fucked.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Let's move on to the next issue. I agree that with the scientists, the consensus of the scientists, the universe had a beginning.
Maybe this is a bit older. That's not the consensus of scientists and has never been. This is something that they've sort of latched onto. So basically, they said that the Big Bang was the beginning of the expansion of the universe, the inflationary period of the universe. And probably a few magazines ran a beginning of the universe, and then they took that to be scientific fact when they didn't actually find out what the cosmologists and cosmogonists were saying.
Yeah, and also quick reminder, the Christian worldview included an eternal universe. Like, they burned people across Europe for centuries for thinking otherwise. The universe
Really?
had been eternal.
No.
But once the Big Bang was proposed, and George Lemaitre looks at it and he goes, this sounds a lot like a let there be light moment kind of thing. Things started to change. But even then, there were still, up until the 1960s, there were subsects of Christianity that were rejecting the Big Bang. It was only after the cosmic microwave background was demonstrated to be a real thing, the Big Bang established fact at that point. That was the nail in the coffin for most of the scientific doubters. Everybody shifted over, and now Big Bang is proof of Genesis.
Yeah.
And we've got the throwbacks are going in other directions. That's one of the reasons young earth creationism started to pop up in the 60s, because they needed a new crazy thing to do.
Wow. That means that Kent Hovind's a traditionalist because he thinks the Big Bang didn't happen.
I mean, I think
Isn't
he's
that
old
wild?
enough. He may be old enough to be a
That's
fossil.
true. That's true. Oh, look, I did a Fundamentalist Fails where Eric Hovind, did you see it? Eric Hovind, the Hovind the Lesser, got on this physicist to say, could speed of light be different at any point? And the physicist
was it fucking
just like,
Jason Lyle?
No, it was Danny Faulkner.
Oh, Faulkner. Yeah, he's so
Yeah.
fun. He has so many fun ideas about how the speed of light might be weird. Like, why do we have light from galaxies, billions of light years away? I don't know what he said to Eric in the video you reviewed, because I haven't had a chance to watch, because it was only on Thursday from my perspective. But
Yeah.
one of Faulkner's videos in his pre-AIG days was God created the universe 6,000 years ago from our point of view, but then he took the Earth and tucked it into a black hole where time didn't pass for billions of years to let the galaxies all get way out there and send their light back. And then when we get to the point, and it's basically a gap theory kind of thing. When we get to the part of the Garden of Eden, that's when he pulls Earth out of the black hole and then makes the black hole magically disappear, and then he creates Eden with the monkeys and the sheeps and the rib surgeries and all that stuff.
Okay, yeah.
So
see, that would
for
go
us,
against
6,000 years.
Well, that would go against what AIG usually puts over, because they're literalists and they don't take it as the 7 days were a metaphor kind of thing. They take it as it was just 7 24-hour periods kind of thing. So that doesn't work for that one. But basically what he said is, he's like, it must have been a miracle. I shit you not. Like, I propose something miraculous to have happened. And so Eric is desperately reaching. He's like, could the speed of light be different outside the solar system than inside it? And Danny Faulkner's just like, no, because if you change the magnetic moments as the speed of light, then all matter would change. Like, it wouldn't work kind of thing. So he's just self-owning with this guy, because Eric's desperately trying to make the speed of light go faster. He's like, oh, haven't they slowed it down in a lab? And as I pointed out, slowing it down's not going to help you. That means that the
It makes
universe
it
is
worse.
older. It makes it worse, right? So, like Danny Faulkner, it was just hilarious to see him have a physicist on who's just basically just knocking Eric down, and he's just, the look in his eyes is cold, dead eyes as he realizes, this guy's not going to back me up on this kind of speed of light stuff. Which, to be fair, Danny Faulkner is at least being honest. Like, he believes in a God. He knows the speed of light can't change without screwing up all matter. He's got to say, no, it can't change.
Miracle.
I propose a miracle. Yeah, exactly. It was magic.
I mean, that's they know that kind of shit at AIG. That's like somebody mentioned the other day that, like, when they have a genetic story for the AIG news, they won't have Georgia Pertamon because she will not lie about genetics.
Right.
And they need to lie about the genetics, so she can't be there. They have other people report about it. It's the same thing. When it's a matter of speed of light or other astrophysics, they do not bring out Danny Faulkner.
Right. So, I just found it hilarious. Poor Eric. I don't have that much sympathy, but, that was funny. That was funny.
So there's no need to argue this. If the universe had a beginning, then it brought itself into existence, or it did not bring itself into existence.
What?
Yeah, but if it did not bring itself into existence, that doesn't mean it was a god done it.
Yeah, this is like multiple levels of non sequitur here.
Right. It could have been in an atemporal state before, which is basically eternal. So it might not have begun anywhere. We don't know. That's the whole point.
Yeah. My personal favorite hypothesis is that there was time, whatever triggered the inflation event happened, and it shifted the direction of the arrow of time to a perpendicular direction. So there was something you might call time, but not moving in a direction that has any meaning relative to the direction time is going as we perceive it.
Oh, interesting.
We don't know. We don't have any way to test it. We don't even know where to begin to explore that kind of thing. But it's a fun idea.
Sure, it's an interesting hypothesis, and we're not claiming to know for sure. These guys are. But sort of to say it either caused itself to exist or it didn't, how do you get from that to God? Weird, wild, absolutely wild.
Since nothing comes from nothing, unless you're into magic and children's imaginations.
Prove it,
that we can
Danny. Prove it, Matt. Show me some nothing, and then demonstrate nothing coming from that nothing.
Well, you win on the straw man as well.
Give birth to a non-nothing.
I've never seen a nothing give birth to a non-nothing. Buy my DVDs. Look, you're right about the straw man. That is like the straw man that has been used since ever since Lawrence Krauss's book landed. Like if they've ever read the book. And that was funny thing about the other day, because Faulkner was sitting there going, oh, Lawrence Krauss's books, I've read it. It has lots of possibly and maybe and plausible. And it's like, yeah. What? Like, so basically what Lawrence Krauss postulated is that the total energy of the universe is zero. The positive energy being balanced out by negative energy, gravity, and dark energy and things like that. So it balances out and makes zero. But he's not talking about literally no thing. He's just talking about no space, no time, no energy, no matter. That's it. Like there's still quantum plasma, I think it is at that point.
I don't even know if you'd describe it at that level. But yeah, we see that sort of thing. And individual photons. Like if we take two photons and slam them into each other, yes, it's not an individual photon, but bear with me. They split and create an electron and a positron. And if the electron and positron touch each other, they'll annihilate back into photons. two photons that go in opposite directions. So we know there's mass. That mass isn't just coming from nowhere. It's the
Right.
electron has a positive mass and the positron has a negative mass.
Right.
Together, they each get half a positron and half an electron, and it creates a mass zero pseudo particle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not nothing, it's a zero, but it's a zero because it's a plus 1/2 and a minus 1/2 in the same pseudo particle.
Pinworm. Hello, pinworm.
More pinworms.
More pinworms, absolutely.
It's an invasion of pinworms.
Clue that the universe did not cause itself to exist. Instead, it was caused to exist by something other than itself. There are only two options to account for this cause, personal and non-personal. There's no third option. So let's look at the impersonal cause, the atheistic cause. An impersonal cause of the universe had to exist prior to the universe. Since time appears to be a function of the physical realm, the prior cause must have existed in a timeless state.
Well, the universe did.
Or at least, separate from time as we know it. It's the same bullshit Craig does. And it's so frustrating. Like, my dude, you can't just posit either it was personal or impersonal. Give me a reason to think there's any reason to believe it might be a person making a choice. Right. Like, you could say the same thing about avalanche. A snowflake hits the top of a mountain, boom, avalanche. Well, either it was personal or impersonal. What would make you think there's a person behind that, my guy?
Right. And I'd love to know how
meteors. Fuck.
I'd love to know how he knows there is no presentation of space-time outside the universe. I mean, we know about our local presentation of space-time. How do you know there is an apparent universe with its own space-time? How do you know that? Or are you just assuming it because it works for your little sort of thing here? Like, this is the thing. Like, oh, we know that time only exists in the universe. Do we? I don't know that. Do you know that?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's been proposed, and a lot of people have been grumping about it, but it's been proposed that our universe might be on the inside of a black hole in the next universe up. And that universe might be the inside of a black hole in the next universe up. And that universe might be a black hole on the inside of our universe. Because once you get outside our universe, you don't have to have things go in a linear fashion because we don't know what the rules are out there.
Yeah.
You don't have to have an infinite regress. Yeah, there's no reason for it. It's not required. Now, maybe there's a chain 1,000 universes long. Maybe there's no end to the chain. We don't freaking know. But it doesn't necessarily have to follow normal causality. It could just loop right back around to our universe.
Yep.
This cause must also have had the necessary and sufficient conditions to bring the universe into existence. But if it was an impersonal cause that possessed the necessary and sufficient conditions.
Necessary and sufficient, or does he mean necessary or sufficient? Because there's an important difference. Something that's sufficient has explanatory power. It could be demonstrated to do the thing, and that would be fun in and of itself because he'd have to present the thing in order to demonstrate it has the power to do the thing. It has the sufficient characteristics. But necessary in this context means it not only couldn't be any other way, which is a thing you also have to demonstrate, but that it's like an absolute fact of the universe, like the speed of light, you know?
Right.
Then the resultant creation would have been automatic. Let me illustrate. If I want to move a boulder with a lever, I would need both the necessary and sufficient conditions. The necessary conditions would be the boulder, the ground, a fulcrum, a lever, and a counterweight. But if one of those necessary conditions is not sufficient, say the counterweight is not heavy enough, then the boulder will not move. But as soon as all the necessary conditions are also sufficient, which includes the counterweight being heavy enough, the result in this impersonal arrangement is automatic. The boulder moves. But if we add a personable variable, say a person's ability to pull the lever when she decides to, then the result occurs when she decides it will occur.
What?
So who's setting up the counterweight? Do we send a robot and tell it to pick a random time to do it?
That doesn't make any sense whatsoever. But if all of that's sufficient, if there's sufficient natural, impersonal, as you call it, reasons, then the personal isn't required. So it's not necessary. What makes you think a person is necessary? You basically just explained, hey, you can have shit happen without people there. Yeah, no joke.
Like avalanches.
Like avalanches, like almost everything. Like, seriously, my guy, get to how you know it's a person. Because this is just, oh, well, I don't believe that there's no person involved. Okay, great. Why?
See, that's another example of how he's going outside of his dichotomies that he's laid out. Like in a normal dichotomous situation, you've got X and not X. But when you want to get a little bit more advanced, a little bit more nuanced, you've also got anti-X and anti-not X. Like you can spread this out into a huge logical spreadsheet, but just one extra layer shows that there's more potential dimensions to this than just the very basic kindergarten, is it an apple or banana, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Now, if there were an impersonal cause that also possessed the necessary and sufficient conditions to create the universe, then the creation would necessarily have been automatic. Since the impersonal cause existed, for lack of a better term, forever, then the universe would have been brought into existence automatically an infinitely long time ago. But this is not the case.
No, well, hold on. That's not how that works. The universe could have been brought into existence at any point on this alternate timeline of causation, because the universe's timeline of causation begins at the beginning point of this universe. It could have been an infinitely long time ago, or it could have been 5 seconds ago on that alternate timeline, which has nothing to do with the internal timeline of the universe.
Or it could have been in an atemporal, like he's basically saying, hey, it was brought into existence outside of time, but in eternal time ago. How does that make sense? How do you get eternal time without time?
Magic.
So if something is in an atemporal state, it's basically like that forever and no time at all. It is in a state that is both instantaneous and eternal, essentially, because there isn't any time at all. So you've just debunked yourself, because you've said, oh yeah, outside of the universe is timeless, but if the universe came about, before it came about, it would have been eternal time. How? Without any time?
Well, remember, Mark, he's only got a master's degree.
Yeah.
I'm never dropping that.
No. Masters in Divinity.
Is not infinitely old, then it is not possible that an impersonal cause brought the universe into existence an infinitely long time ago. Something that would create the universe had to exist in a timeless state before it and unchanging, but it had to have the necessary and sufficient conditions. It automatically would have occurred infinitely long time ago, which means the universe would be infinitely old, but it's not. So therefore that can't work.
It can't be infinitely old without time. So before the universe came about, if you're saying, hey, it'd be there for an infinite amount of time. No, it's there for no time at all, because there is no time. This man's thinking is so flawed. Seriously.
I don't know if it's broken, dishonest, or both. His boulder moving scenario, if it's automatic, it would have happened an infinitely long time ago. No, it would have happened when the conditions were meant for it to happen. I mean, he wants to kick it a step further. He wants to kick it back to God. Well, if God did it, and God's been around for an infinite amount of time, he also would have created the universe an infinitely long time ago.
Yes. Special pleading incoming.
It makes more sense to say that there was a personal cause that contained both the necessary and sufficient conditions, and that in a particular moment of his choosing decided to say, let there be light, and the universe came into existence. In the case of the creation of the universe, this would mean that...
Yeah, but how long ago was that before time? Exactly. And if God was eternal before that, then there would have been an infinite amount of time part. Like you're right. His argument works for God as well, because if God was around for an infinite amount of time before he created the universe, he'd never get to creating the universe.
Yeah, we get the Hilbert's Hotel, Reaper Paradox, whatever you want to go with. And I should note that whenever we run into one of these paradoxes like this, as we saw with the C.S. Lewis thing last year, it shows that we're looking at the problem from the wrong perspective. All it's doing is ruling out the perspective that's being used, saying this creates an absurdity. That doesn't mean the phenomena we're observing isn't happening. It means we're looking at it from the wrong fucking end of the telescope.
Right. And I mean, I hate how he's saying, like, oh, that doesn't tell you when it was 14.6 billion years, like nearly 15 billion years ago. Okay, that's how long ago was that. But that's our local presentation of space-time, which only applies for this universe.
Not even this universe. As you yourself are aware, gravity alters the flow of time.
Well, yeah.
From the surface of the sun, for example, granted, the sun's only been around for 4 billion years or so, but the last 4 billion years for us have been closer to 3 billion years on the surface of the sun because of the difference in time flow.
Yes,
and
time
bigger,
dilation.
heavier stars, that effect is increased. And there's black holes out there, primordial black holes that formed in the first few microseconds of the universe. It's still the first few microseconds of the universe within those locations. So how much time there's been, it isn't even a universal.
So you're saying that time is like a wibbly wobbly, limey whiny ball of time stuff.
Basically.
I can't remember the exact quote, but that was a fantastic episode of Doctor Who. I'll just say that right now. That was Don't Blink. Yeah, that was a fantastic episode.
The personal being transcends the universe itself and is the...
Sorry,
I just said so cool. And also time capsule itself, because it involves archaic technology like DVDs.
Yeah.
Cause of it and decided to create it at a particular point in the time past. Hence, another example of transcendence. Now, Mr. Barker, you said in your book, Godless, page 101, if something is true, we don't invoke faith. Instead, we use reason to prove it. Faith is intellectual bankruptcy. Mr.
Why do I get the feeling he really doesn't like that? He doesn't like what he said. I would kind of agree. It depends how they're using faith. Like, because, it used to be that faith is like sort of belief with no evidence. It's just, believing in spite of whatever. Whatever suggests otherwise, it is having that confidence in something, even though it might not be warranted. That used to be, but now I hear theists sort of say, well, faith is having evidence and confidence in it due to evidence. And it's like, this is not how faith has been used throughout the centuries, for a start. And B, it literally says in the Bible that faith is the evidence of things unseen, the confidence in things hoped for, kind of thing. The substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things unseen. So, I don't know where they're getting this idea that faith is just confidence with evidence. It's almost like it just sort of parrots the sort of scientific view.
Yeah, they love to try to create some kind of false equivalence between faith and science based on empirical reality.
Right.
But they, at the same time as they try to tear down science and evidence based on empirical reality, much like how Matt is arguing a case, but instead of demonstrating the thing he's supposed to be demonstrating, like if he ends his opening right now, Dan wins, because since Matt has the positive position, he needs to present a positive case, and he hasn't done that. He spent the whole thing saying how atheism makes no sense, it defies the laws of logic. And we see this all the damn time. It's we're gonna tear down evolution. We're gonna point at the whale bones and say evolution doesn't make any sense. Therefore,
Mhm.
creation must be true, even though I presented no evidence for creation.
Oh, that's another great thing that Danny Faulkner said in the last episode to Eric Hoban. He's like, I'll look at the creationist model when we have one because we don't have a model, and it's like, oh, he says we can't even agree on a model, and it's like, oh, Danny Faulkner, like I know that you're a theist, but you are actually telling the truth right now. They don't have a model. They don't have an explanation. They don't have anything. They've got a God done it. And that's it. They've got this faith-based belief, and then they try to fit anything they can to that faith-based belief.
It's
all
flat Earth with less evidence.
right. All Dan Barker has to do now is say, "Hey, this is just the way the universe formed." That's it. I've got an explanation.
Ta-da!
Oh, it doesn't work. Why not? Why doesn't it work? Wild.
Barker, as an atheist, without invoking faith, that science will
Hello,
come up with an
Titan.
answer. Without simply dismissing the question, can you provide an explanation for the cause of the universe that is based on reason? Let me get to my final segment here. I do apologize for the coughing, folks. It's really... In your debate with Peter Payne at the University of Wisconsin, I'm assuming that's here, in March of 2005, you said, quote, "There are no actions in and of themselves that are always absolutely right or wrong. It depends on the context," close quote. But what you said is self-refuting. You propose an absolute moral law about actions, namely, that the moral right or wrong of any action always depends on context. So you provided an absolute moral truth about actions. But how's that possible in an atheistic viewpoint, an atheistic worldview? How can anybody have an absolute moral?
They're not. How can anyone have absolute morals?
You know, you can't have an absolute temperature. You know, you're roughly 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, but your body temperature fluctuates depending on, whether you're sleeping or awake, or if you've eaten or exercised or etc.
Mhm.
By my pointing out that you don't have an absolute temperature, I'm making an absolute statement about something that
Absolute
I have
statement, yeah.
declared is not absolute. That's not
Yes.
how that works, Matt.
No. And I've been launched at this one before, and they sort of said, hey, because you say that, morality is not absolute, you're making an absolute statement. It's like, no, because one's absolute morality, I'm making a statement about some ontology, right? I'm
Yeah.
making an epistemological statement. I'm not making a moral statement about morals. I'm making a statement about actuality, about morals. I'm describing morals. So it's not an absolute moral statement.
Mm-hmm. Weirdly, it's one of the things, every accusation is a confession sort of deal. They
Yeah.
will love if they can catch you phrasing your terminology even slightly off. They'll be like, oh, you're making the ontology epistemology error. But they do that intentionally all the
Yeah.
time, like Matt's
Yep.
doing right now. Holy shit.
Right. He's basically making a category error. He's applying a statement that no morals are absolute as a function of a description and saying, oh, well, you're making a moral absolute statement. No, there's no ought in that, right? There's no, hey, you ought to treat morals as if they're not absolute, or you ought to do this, or ought to. So he's not making an absolute moral statement. He's just making a descriptive statement of how morals work. That's all. So, Matt, category error. Whoa. Time to hand back your masters, mate. Time to hand back your masters. Because, somebody leveraged this one against me and it took like 2 seconds to destroy. Because when I say there's no absolute morals, I'm not making an absolute moral statement. So it doesn't work. It's like when you say, I don't think anybody has absolute knowledge about anything. And they're like, is that absolute? And you go, no.
Only a Sith deals in absolutes.
Right.
Absolutely.
Matt is a Sith.
You cannot. Nevertheless, your sentiment makes sense from an atheistic perspective, but it means that no one No atheist can rationally justify any objection about the behavior of God in the Bible.
Why is he onto morality of all things? Does God exist? It's a weird pivot, right? Transcendence and the laws of logic. Oh, we're onto morality.
Yeah, I'm going to demonstrate the Christian God specifically. So here's this weird thing about the universe we can't explain, therefore God. Morality exists, therefore God. It's all very clearly, specifically the Christian God. No other
Specifically,
God
yeah.
can explain these things. Yes.
Yeah. I don't think he was coming here to debate. Like, I think he just like nothing about what he said suggests the Christian God. Nothing points at the Christian God. He's not in any way argued for a Christian God. He's just argued for some God. And this is what we see from pre-suppers all the time.
He's not even up to a God. Like, he left off on this transcendental
That's
bullshit
true.
with a timeless, spaceless, personal yada yada. He didn't
Yeah.
even connect it to God.
Right.
It could be the ghost of Forrest Velkai existing outside of time. Going, you know what? It'd be a really funny joke.
That's true. Look, and this is what I've noticed with some of these arguments. Like, I was looking up the 5 ways of Thomas Aquinas, and sort of a lot of his stuff is like, and this is what we call God. Like, oh, the universe has a cause, and this is what we call God. It's like, really? Because I don't think that's your definition of a God that you're using inside of your head to tell people to do this, that, and the other, you know, to suggest what their behavior should be. It is the God of the Bible that has all of these precepts and tenets and, commandments for us. Like, we're not, we're not saying, hey, the universe had a natural cause and, a child universe formed and that is what we call God. No, nobody's saying that.
In
It's
fact,
so dishonest.
it runs into a contradiction. Because going to say mystery, mystery, mystery that we call God. Okay, you can do that. You're worshiping a God whose nature is mystery. It is the unknown. It is all the things you can't explain. Fine, whatever. But then to turn around and say it has revealed morality, that's contradictory to its nature. It can't be revealing shit if it is the nature of mystery, you know?
Right. Yeah. It's just weird. It really is just the presupposition and then finding, whatever they can to fit in with it. And this is a really poor example. Just the whole idea that, hey, we don't know where the universe came from, therefore God, is essentially his argument.
Behold, there are trees.
Yes, look at the trees.
Nor could you rationally condemn any actions of the Nazis killing the Jews or anybody or
Hey!
Godwin! Godwin!
Godwin's law!
16 minutes.
Right,
Remarkable
well done,
restraint.
Matt. You got there. Woohoo! Wow.
anything. What gives you the right to judge the actions of any God in any particular context? In your atheism, you cannot have an objective, non-changing standard by which you can make consistent, absolute moral judgments. But I have heard countless atheists tell me, that's wrong, that's wrong. And they don't have any basis for it other than their opinions. There is no moral objective standard. And I question them on it.
Why is he so angry?
I mean, first of all, they're not saying it's objective. They're saying, from my subjective point of view, I deem that to be wrong, but you actually can. In fact, the only way you can get to anything approaching an objective standpoint is to abandon the subjective perspective of some external being telling you what to do based on its own whims and wishes. If you have a principle that exists outside yourself, outside everyone, an opinion and whatnot, you set it up there and you say, reducing harm is a value. It's a priority of our civilization. Then, based on that framework and the entailments that come from it, you can make moral determinations objectively. Does it comport with the priority that we have embedded into our value system?
And that isn't me deciding that value all by myself. It's intersubjective. We agree on it. It's normative. We all sort of go, hey, wouldn't it suck to have people assault you on the street and stuff? Well, let's not do that.
It does ruin your day, yes.
Yes. It sure does. So it's kind of like he wants to say, hey, well, it's all just up to your personal opinion. That can't be correct, because if I just decide that assaulting people is the right thing to do, society won't change the moral system just because I decide it. So it's not up to me. Oh, have a good day, Jeff. Take care, mate. Take care. Oh, I'm clicking everything.
All the buttons.
All the buttons. You know, a button you could push is the like button. It's a good button. It feels good. Trust me.
Ooh,
Give it a try.
There's another button too. It's
I'm
right
trying to
next
get
to the like.
better. Oh, the subscribe. Look, you're just naughty if you click that one. Look, I'm trying to get better at my like, you know, call out stuff. So yeah. I thought
No,
that was smooth. I thought that was really
yeah,
smooth.
that's pretty good.
Yeah. Hang on a second. My mum was under. They were boofing. Like, is that what I think it is? Like Kavanaugh boofing? Wow. All right. That's a vivid image.
Conversations don't last very long. If you say, though, that societies have evolved and we have learned what better behavior is, which is begging the question, and has its own philosophical problems, then that means the majority, whatever the majority wants, is right. It would then mean that you cannot condemn the Nazis. It would mean you can't condemn anybody. But more significantly, by appealing to the principle that society determines what is right and wrong, you're saying that there is a universal moral principle, a moral ought, that states that what people want is morally right and ought to be followed.
Well, no. And the fact that no God came down to stop any Nazis or any other people sort of shows that it is subjective. Like, it'd be nice if there was an objective standard, but essentially all there is us deciding what's best for ourselves.
Yeah.
And even the Nazis, they did not make good choices on what was best for themselves. Like, that's the thing. They considered that entirely moral.
Yeah, that's why it happened. The people in charge collectively decided there's nothing wrong with it. They're going to do it because there isn't an objective moral standard for people to adhere to, despite the fact they were overwhelmingly Christian. And we did condemn them the same way during the Nuremberg trials. The assembled nations collectively said, I don't care what you thought about it. We've decided that's wrong. And you're going to prison for a long time, or whatever.
Or firing squad, I think it was. I think didn't they hang some people in the Nuremberg trial?
There were some executions. Yeah.
Yeah. Nuremberg trials. Nuremberg. I know how to spell Nuremberg trials. There we go.
It's German spelling.
24 were sentenced to death by hanging. It was hanging. Okay. Yeah, and 3 were acquitted. 20 lifelong imprisonment and 98 other prison sentences.
And a few who, got paper clipped into other programs, but details.
Well, generally it wasn't the scientists who were working on stuff that were at the head of the organizations, Ember. Like, we're really talking about the leaders that we imprisoned. So
yeah, like the whole V2 project. I mean, hell, the whole Golgotha complex that they had. None of those people were involved in the gas chambers or anything with the cultural purging or the eugenics. None of it. They were all just doing science, but fuck.
Yeah. Look, I think most of them just liked rockets, to be honest with you. Like, they just liked firing off rockets and doing rocket science. And it's like, okay. Paperclip to you. So if you're unaware, Operation Paperclip was a US operation that essentially they found a whole bunch of rocket scientists in Germany in an area that was going to be taken over by the USSR, or the Soviets, basically. So they basically flew them over to America and investigated them and took some of them on board. Who was it? Von Braun was the most famous, who essentially they became the rocket scientists that really got NASA going. They didn't
Mhm.
start NASA, and they didn't sort of, NASA isn't this Nazi thing. Don't believe flat earthers, but there was a whole bunch of German scientists. But the thing is, while they were all part of the Nazi party, if you were a German scientist, you're expected to join the party. Like, and they had a lot of their families and stuff held hostage. So when the Americans rescued them,
Mhm.
they brought them all over. So,
Yeah, the politics were very rough. But yeah, the German
yeah,
rocket scientists were generations ahead of the rest of the world. Like
yes,
our first few launches with what were the names of the monkeys? Were they Henry the first, second, third? I forget what the hell. It was a really common name, but I forget it offhand. But the first several launches were literally V2s that came over with
Yep.
the scientists. We just repurposed them.
yep. And I think, Explorer 1 was the first satellite, and it was so bad when you compare it to Sputnik. It was absolutely atrocious. Like the first American satellite, I can't remember how much it weighed, but it weighed almost nothing. And the Sputnik had a lot more weight. So
Oh yeah.
the US was getting killed in the space race to start off with before the German scientists came on board. But,
Yeah. It's one of the reasons there were rumors about alien contacts and occult activity, because their technology was so vastly far ahead of everybody else. Jedi
Yep.
mentions within of having jet aircraft. They actually
Yep.
succeeded. The Messerschmitt
Yeah.
262 saw combat over Europe. I met a World War II veteran when I was very small, and I asked him if he ever saw a Messerschmitt 262 because I was just so into World War II aircraft.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
he was really impressed. He's like, how the hell do you? And then he tells me the story about how this one time there were, Focke-Wulf 190s harassing his bomber and shit, and they hit or miss whether they were going to make it. And then out of nowhere comes this black speck, and it's fast. It's just gone. It was going so fast. He didn't even get a good look at it. He assumes it was a 262 because they also
Right.
had a rocket propelled plane, which they could
Mhm.
only stay in the air for a few minutes, and you only got one pass with those because they went so fast. But
Right.
he knew what those looked like, and it wasn't one of the. I do digress, but they were
Mhm.
super close on stealth technology. They had the
Mhm.
the
The wooden
GO229
one.
was nearly complete when we
Right.
took over the test complex. So it's crazy advanced technology.
Yeah. But I mean, the British had their own crazy advanced technology, most notably radar, which was a
Mhm.
huge equalizer. And
Yeah, that was very nice to have. Yep, and we of
and
course got good at blowing shit up
yeah,
really big.
yes, you guys definitely blew up big, very big. Japanese found that out the hard way. Now, but also the British had Christopher, which was the world's first computer. That was pretty damn impressive. They broke Enigma with a computer, the very first computer. Alan Turing broke it. Gay guy, really hard done by, but that was the first compuder. And
Well, first electronic computer.
yeah, but it was basically the
what was the name of
start of the modern computer.
Lovelace's? Because Lovelace wrote a program for what was
She
it? The
wrote an
analytical
algorithm.
machine,
Yes,
but
she
that
wrote
was
an
a
algorithm
non-electronic
for it.
one. It details tangents within tangents.
Correct. It was a mechanical one. So an algorithm is a series of programming steps intended to do something, and she wrote the first algorithm that was intended to actually do something specific.
And she wrote it as a footnote to a translation of a research paper.
Yep. Yep. Amazing. Ada Lovelace, incredible. These people have all, we stand on the shoulders of giants is absolutely true. But without Alan Turing, we probably would not be as advanced in computers as we would be today. He was a genius, absolutely a genius. So thank you, Turing. What did they do to Turing?
Oh no.
So Yeah, so Turing was found guilty of having sort of homosexual sex with another man, and he was
He
chemically
was
castrated.
guilty of being a
Yes,
gay man. fuck?
Yes, he was guilty of being a gay man, and he was chemically castrated and ended up taking his own life. We think through a poisoned apple, but
Those damn apples.
I mean
This is why I use PCs.
Yeah, the English Parliament issued a pardon and an apology and all of that kind of stuff. So way later. Oh, you meant it was terrible? Yeah, absolutely horrible, absolutely horrible. And actually, I was watching is it Sally Payne, the Naval Academy lecturer? She's fantastic. She sort of said, yeah, dropping Nagasaki and Hiroshima were really bad, but if the war had continued, a lot more people would have died of starvation, because that was going to happen. And the amount, not just the amount of American servicemen lives, but Japan was on the verge of starving to death. So it would have been a lot more people if they had continued the way they did. So, yeah, that's up in the air whether it was required or not. But she's got a lot of arguments to say that it was. So,
yeah, there's always been propaganda and apologetics about it. That doesn't necessarily mean that it was the wrong decision.
Right.
But the shit that's presented, it's the same arguments they made back in the day. Truman famously waffled about it because he was like, we don't kill civilians. We're the United States. We do not do that. Now, don't look at our own history. Never mind what happened to the Native Americans and the African. No, we don't kill civilians. That's our thing. But yeah, they've been making that argument since the beginning. Like, yeah, we're going to kill, tens of thousands of innocent people. Yeah. But the line was, the emperor will not surrender. And if we bomb the emperor, then there's no one to do the surrendering.
Right.
So we have no other choice.
Yeah. So, and the emperor would not surrender unless there was a invasion of the mainland, which would have been absolutely devastating. The war would have dragged on, and many more Japanese people would have died through starvation and, just getting caught in crossfire and things like that. So, it's all very debatable. It really is. But anyway, let's move on because I don't think anyone's got a good answer for that one. Yeah.
But that's self-contradictory. It doesn't work in an atheist perspective. In that same debate, you said, quote, there is no universal ought, close quote. This must also mean that you cannot assign a universal moral value to the principle, quote, that which enhances humanity is good, that which threatens it is evil, close quote, which is what you said in your book, Losing Faith in Faith, on page 134. In addition, you said in your debate with Doug Wilson in 1997 that morality is an issue of avoiding pain.
2 minutes.
Well, besides assigning an absolute moral value there, how do you know that your statement is true? And did you use a scientific method to determine that?
No, he could have that as an intersubjective quality to like a meta-ethical goal, a meta-ethical framework to work towards. I mean, you don't have to agree that avoiding pain is good. You don't have to agree with that, but I'm pretty sure you would, because most people do.
But did you use the scientific method to determine that?
I did not have a control on my experiment. Yeah, no, this is just basically him claiming. So what I want to know from these sort of, oh, well, you don't have an objective morality. Can you demonstrate yours is? That's what I want to know, because you're making some mighty big claims about having a God giving you objective morality. Can you demonstrate it is the case? Because I can demonstrate objective things. I can demonstrate, hey, this coffee cup is objectively here. I can demonstrate that. Now demonstrate your objective morality. Go for it.
Now, I've quoted you in order to demonstrate your inconsistency and the inconsistency of the atheistic perspective. Is it possible for atheists to offer any rational, necessary preconditions analysis for the transcendentals that exist in the universe, in the nature of logical absolutes, in the necessary conditions that must exist in order for the universe to not be infinitely old, but have been created at a finite point in time by decision, and moral absolutes, which I know atheists love to cite in their righteousness, yet have no basis intellectually, to
I've never heard a moral non-realist cite moral absolutes in a basis for their real. Just because you're saying, hey, it's wrong for you to do this, doesn't mean it's a moral absolute, Matt. Right? We're not pointing to moral facts. We're pointing to societal norms and things that allow our society to work. So if you go around being an ass to people, we'll say, hey, that's wrong to do, because it will cause disruption to our society and cause it to degrade.
Yeah, and he still hasn't presented anything favoring
Nothing
his own
whatsoever.
position.
Yep.
All he's done is here's a few weird things. Checkmate, atheists. Holy shit.
Yeah. I'd load it.
Ever assert something is right or is wrong. You can only have your opinion. In three very important areas: logic, laws of logic, our existence, and objective morality. The Christian worldview makes sense because we can say it is a revelation from the very character and the mind of God. You not like the explanation, but it works. Especially when we note that there are transcendental aspects evident in each category that cannot, in my opinion, be explained from the no God perspective.
The transcendental is not evident. It is not evident at all. That's you claiming it is. Why is it evident? What is the evidence that these things in some way transcend space and time? Because all you've said is they remain consistent throughout the universe. That's not transcending space and time. That's just occupying, like, that's an absolute. Okay. Do those absolutes function outside of the universe? They do. How do you know, Matt? Have you been outside the universe to check? Yeah, I feel like he's going to get into a circular argument that it's going to be.
Better yet, dispense with all these middlemen of this thing might exist outside the universe and that might point towards my favorite mythology or something kind of like it. Then I'm just going to assume it's the thing. How about you just show me the damn thing, Matt?
Yeah.
But can be explained when we include God in our presuppositional set. So when we only have two worldviews to work from, God and not God, and the no God position is found to lack the necessary explanatory power for transcendent characteristics, then the position that God exists is validated. God exists.
Thank you, Matt.
But first, Matt, you show us that it isn't universe creating pixies who have morals, moral absolute dictates.
Sure, or it's just that the logical absolutes are just a fundamental property of the universe. The way that it formed instantiates these things as they are, just with natural law. Is there a reason why that can't be the case logically? No? Okay.
You know, I have an atlas around here somewhere. It's from back in my repo days when we still used physical maps. And there's lots of maps. There's lots of maps. Some of them are more accurate than others, but you know, we have a book with maps in it. And that's an objective truth. It objectively exists. Therefore, when a city doesn't match the map, it's the city that's wrong.
Yeah, basically.
Because the map is objective.
Thank you. You have 20 minutes for an opening statement.
Thank you, Matt. My mic on? I know how you feel. I think in our last debate, I was the one who was sick, right? And you were like worried about me. So
yes, I was.
Sounds like Dan is a lot quieter.
Feeling. I'm sorry, I don't have that anymore.
They've turned on his mic yet.
Does this mic need to be turned up? 1, 2, 3, 4. Is that better? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Raz, 2, 3, 4. Is this better?
Oh, watch out,
1, 2, 3, 4,
and
5,
you'll get
6, 7,
deported
okay.
these days for stuff like that.
Sorry you're feeling bad, but I'm glad you made it. What a valiant effort, battling the weather and Delta Airlines.
And canceled flights and late ones and missed planes.
So as you know, I used to believe.
God, he's so whingy. Like, come on, dude. Seriously. Wow.
Like Matt, I was an ordained minister. I preached for 19 years.
It would be funnier if he said, no. What do you say? Is Delta Airlines or something, did he say? It would have been funnier if he just said, yeah, they're the devil, you know, like they are literally Satan. That would have been a lot of fun. Like, come on, dude, seriously. He's so bloviating.
Years. I preach pretty much what he believes, although Protestants have their little different wrinkles in their theologies. And these days, we're not killing ourselves over them like they used to in the past, fortunately. Like John Calvin murdering his friend and co-reformer, Michael Servetus, over a simple little theological difference about whether the Trinity is real. In fact, Servetus was right. John Calvin was wrong about the Trinity in the Bible. And what did John Calvin do? He could have stopped the execution, but he didn't. Today, there's no burning fires for us to talk about. Today, we're much more civil. And I like Matt as a person. He knows how to conduct an intelligent dialogue. I believe strongly that Jesus was my Savior. I confess my sins. I believe that the Bible was inerrant and true. I traveled and I preached to Mexico. I preached all over the United States. I was in Mexico trying to convert Catholics into Christians, you know, that kind of a missionary. And it worked. And but I changed my mind, and I can't tell you that whole story tonight, but you can read about it in the book that Matt read, the book Godless, or in my book Losing Faith in Faith, where I tell how I went through a process. And most of that process, for me, hinged on the Bible. I used to believe the Bible was the inerrant, rock-solid basis for truth, that we needed an operating manual for our species. But I painfully learned that the Bible is not a reliable source of truth. I used to preach it. I used to believe it. I sometimes saw what I thought were answers to prayer. In fact, one of my buddies had lost his voice, and I laid my hands on Gary and said, "Be healed in Jesus' name," and his voice came back. Should we try it tonight? Maybe.
It's actually a neat trick.
But most of the times, those things.
Placebo effect, mate. Like, we know that these things happen. You know, like that if people believe they're going to be cured, sometimes that's enough.
Yeah, sometimes it does. I have to chuckle because I do respect Dan's intellect. He's really thought so much of this so far through. He spent a shit ton of time working on this, and he's quick-witted too. He articulates his stuff off the top of his head very adroitly. But when he says stuff like, I really believe the Bible was infallible, I just can't help but think, yes, clearly the book where the guy lost a debate to a talking donkey is infallible and inerrant.
Yeah. Or the book that has the way to get striped sheep is to put them in front of striped sticks. That's how to breed striped sheep. Yeah. No, that infallible book. Yeah. No, we know that's how genetics works. Forget all of this, you know, DNA, you know, stuff, these base pairs and stuff. No, striped sticks is how it happens. Yes.
It didn't happen. It's kind of like confirmation bias. I saw what I wanted to see. You find what you're looking for. And now I know that there's perfectly good natural explanations for what I thought were answers to prayer. But the Bible was the big deal. I remember meeting some Christians who had a different point of view from me, who thought that Adam and Eve were not historical. And I thought, that's horrible. That's heresy. God mentions Adam and Eve as historical people. But those Christians, good Christians, they went to church. They thought Adam and Eve were just sort of a metaphor, kind of like how Jesus made up stories. Jesus made up the story of the prodigal son. It doesn't matter if it's a true story. You wouldn't call him a liar, would you? He just made up a story to teach a lesson, right? There was no real prodigal son. There's not even a name for him. And so the early Israelites did a similar thing with Adam and Eve. We now know from evolution, the fact of evolution, there could not have been an Adam and Eve. And even if there were, they would have come out of Africa. We know that our species came out of Africa, not the Middle East. So these Christians thought, well, then the Adam and Eve story in the Garden of Eden is also sort of a metaphorical, not an actually true thing. And then I got to thinking, well, then, okay, the prodigal son is a parable and Adam and Eve are a metaphor. Then what other characters in that book? Maybe God himself is just one huge figure of speech.
Yes.
Yep. And the problem with it, if Adam and Eve is a metaphor, then there was no original sin, right? Then you basically take original sin off the table. The problem comes then for a Christian that why did Jesus need to be killed in order to absolve the sins? Because there was no original sin. There was no reason why people need redemption.
And even Ken Ham articulates this often. He's like, Genesis
absolutely
has to be real because if there's no Adam and Eve, then you don't need Jesus. Yes, yes, Ken. Absolutely.
Yes, that is true. So it kind of is this sort of any Christian that sort of will you know, the creation story is just a metaphor. It's sort of like, well, then you're sort of saying Jesus is a metaphor as well, or at least the part that has him saving people from their sins is a metaphor as well. So yeah, it basically tears apart Christianity. But I'm sure there's some very flexible gymnastics that can be done to get around that one.
Oh yeah, they've been doing that since the beginning, every time something goes different from a prophecy. Oh, well, that was supposed to happen that way, even though the prophecy said otherwise, because it's all according to God's plan. The fact that it happened the way it happened means it's according to God's plan. We get the book of Mark written, the modern book of Mark, not the original one, in response to the destruction of the Second Temple. And then we get Matthew to clean up the plot holes left by Mark, and so on and so forth. The whole empty tomb thing that Paul never talked about because it wasn't part of the myth tradition that he got his hands on. And it goes all the way back. All of it, this is actually God's plan. Every time God fails, this is God's plan. And it's the same sort of thing every time.
Yeah.
And basically, that's what it is. It's one big metaphor that one particular religion invented. The Bible is full of contradictions. It's full of unhistorical comments. It's full of anachronisms. You read recently last month out of Tel Aviv how the Bible got it wrong about the domesticated camels during the time of the patriarchs. That's just a factual archaeological error. There are scientific mistakes, and so
it is a fun one.
There's some truth.
What's that?
The camels. It's a fun one that I only recently heard about myself. TLDR, because I'm sure most of the audience, it's common knowledge already. When the Exodus happened, domesticated camels didn't exist in the region, and they wouldn't for several hundred years more.
Wow.
It's one of the bigger anachronisms.
Exodus did not happen. Like the Jews were never slaves in Egypt. Right? We know this to be the case. There was no cross culture between the Canaanites and the Egyptians. It just wasn't there. Like, think about it. Like the amount of time, the amount of cross culture between Caucasians and people from Africa in the South when that happened was incredible. Like the amount of crossed culture is just massive. There was nothing like it in Egypt. And we kind of know that the Canaanites was a vassal state. So they were off in their own land, just Egypt came by once in a while and said, hey, if you don't give us tribute, we're going to kick you. And that was pretty common back then. But this story that they're all slaves in Egypt and, they had to get out and stuff, obviously never happened at all.
You mean Moses didn't write about his own death?
Pretty sure he didn't. Yeah, pretty sure. Do you remember that I think it was Ron Wyatt. Somebody found some wood in the Red Sea, and they're like, oh, it's one of the chariots, and then it's just like a boat that had sunk or something. Like it was nothing. It was hilarious.
Yeah, chariot wheels that turned out to be train wheels. From a sunken transport vessel. Much like, there's so much shit exactly like that. But it also goes to show how a lot of these stories get changed when they find something. They go, oh, this must be the thing, and then when it clearly is not the thing, they change the story to make it resemble the thing.
Hilarious.
In the Bible, but basically my confidence in the reliability of revealed scripture fell dramatically. And then my whole idea about the existence of God. So we're debating the existence of something, and if you notice, and during my rebuttal, I'll reply to Matt's comments. We're debating the existence of something that Matt hasn't even defined yet. He just uses this word God, and he says God in the Bible, but he actually hasn't defined this being. So I suppose I need to ask you, how are you defining it? What is he made of? The Bible says God is a spirit. So I'm going to have to ask you, what in the heck does the word spirit mean? Define it for us. And if spirit is something as opposed to nothing, then it must be measurable in some way. But in any debate like we're having tonight, the burden of proof is on the affirmative. Matt and I both agree there's a natural world. We agree with that. We agree that our bodies are physical, biological organisms. We agree with that. But Matt's making an additional assertion above and beyond what we both agree. And so when that happens...
Oh, I love this framing. Yeah. And that's the point. Whenever you're getting presuppers going, well, you presuppose the laws of logic and all of this stuff, you can just go, yeah. You can feel free to deny them if you want. but you're making an extra claim. Like, we're both saying, hey, the laws of logic or the natural way the universe works is there, and we agree on that. You're saying, hey, it all comes from God. And I'm saying, no, demonstrate that. So I love the reframing that he's doing and basically putting the burden of proof back to where it belongs, which is the person claiming something extra on top of what we agree. Because we all agree the physical world exists. We all agree that, you are there, I'm here, we have minds, we can do these things. We all agree on that. You're making an extra claim on top. So, they love to shift the burden of proof and say, hey, you're claiming a not God world, so you've got to demonstrate it. A, God's unfalsifiable, so that's ridiculous. And B, you're the one claiming something extra to what we both agree on. You're making the positive claim. So Dan's absolutely right. And I love his reframing of this.
Yeah, he's very effective at it. I mean, lots of practice, but, still props.
Yep.
The burden of proof is on the shoulders of the person who makes that claim. If I were to claim, Matt, I've invented a perpetual motion machine, and Matt would say, really, I want to see it. No, I just want you to believe it. No, but you need to show it to me. Can I just fold my arms and say, well, prove that I haven't? You can't do that. The burden of proof is on the shoulders of the person making the claim. Atheism is simply the absence of a belief in that claim.
Right.
There's a tiny subset of atheists that you might call anti-theists, but in general, atheism is just the absence of a belief. So I'm an atheist because of a certain number of absences. I have my own addictions here. Caffeine. The goddess Caffeina, I think is.
Caffeina. I love it. Thanks, Dan.
A number of absences which justify not believing in a God. You can't prove there's no leprechauns, can you? In fact, there's evidence for leprechauns. Have you ever eaten a box of Lucky Charms? Right? So there's evidence for leprechauns, right? But you
reliable historical resources.
Yeah, look at the rainbows.
It's demonstrable. Leprechauns are more demonstrable. Yeah. Shit.
And so I'll point out, like, the tactic that Matt was using earlier with, like, if a God exists, then we would see these transcendentals. We see these transcendentals, their God exists. You can say, if leprechauns exist, then we would see rainbows. We see rainbows, therefore leprechauns exist. That's the fallacy, affirming the consequent. There's other reasons rainbows might be there apart from leprechauns. And there's other reasons why the laws of logic and physics and math and whatever other thing he wants to point to, morality, is there apart from a God. So he can't, his logic is absolutely terrible.
Well, there's not. They might be hiding. They might. So what most of us are in this room are a-leprechaunis. I guess we could say there are two competing worldviews in this world. There's the leprechaunist worldview and the a-leprechaunist worldview, like Matt was trying to say. But with the existence of a God, I noticed.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, isn't it? Like, prove that a Bigfoot doesn't exist. Prove that Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist. It is, and he's spelled it out perfectly. You believe in a not Bigfoot world, so you've got to demonstrate that. No, if I'm the one claiming that Bigfoot is out there, I'm the one who has to demonstrate it.
Yeah, and once again, apologies to Dave from Captive Desk, but Nancy from Apostate Sisters and I have founded the Church of Not Bigfoot, and we have cookies. So,
Oh. Are they Bigfoot cookies? That would actually be ironic, wouldn't it?
Well, they're spiritual cookies, so they can.
Oh, okay. Well, then they can. Well, if they're spiritual, they can be any damn thing you want, really.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
A number of lacks or absences. The first one, of course, is the absence of a definition, which Matt hasn't given us yet, except in some nebulous terms of some transcendent person, right? Whatever that means. But he needs to be a little more clear about what he's arguing for. Yeah, there's never been a coherent definition of this God offered that makes any sense. In fact, many of the definitions, including the Christian definition of God, contains mutually incompatible properties. Here's just one example. I call it FANG, the free will argument for the non-existence of God. This is just one. It depends, and there's a constellation of characteristics that different theologians have put together to try to make their God work or not. Is he omniscient? Is he omnipotent? Is he all of these things? And they tinker with definitions. And I know the Calvinist ones is a little more extreme, but FANG.
Well, Calvinists don't think we have free will. That's the weird thing about the Calvinists, is they'll say that God knows who all the elect are. And it's weird to see a Calvinist trying to convert people, because a Calvinist basically goes, well, a god is just will select who he wants and you have no control over it, right? It's just preordained who's going to be the elect and who isn't. And they don't sort of claim that a god is all good either. They just say that God does whatever he wants. So Calvinists are a bit strange. I don't know what flavor of Calvinist Matt is, but yeah, the Calvinists are a bit wacky.
It's a tricky proposition to try to propose to somebody. Like, God is already pre-selected who gets called, so
Yep.
join up because reasons. But what they used to do back in the day, before there was a concentrated effort to make people dumber for generations on end for political reasons. That's a whole other topic for another time.
Yeah,
But what they
yeah.
used to do is say God has it all planned out. God knows who's going to do what and who's going to end up being saved. So I'm presenting you with this information. If you understand yourself to be a saved person, you want to be saved from hell, you think you are included in the elect, then you should be a member of my church. That's where you belong as a member of the elect. That was the sales pitch.
Yep. But it's odd because they don't actually believe in free will, but they put the message out there and whoever joins is part of the elect kind of thing. But it's weird debating sort of morality with a Calvinist, because they're basically like, well, God just wants what he wants. And it's sort of a might makes right. Like, he just decides what's moral. So, I don't know why Matt's appealing to absolute morality, because Calvinists don't believe in absolute morality as far as they may do. Some sects of them may do, actually. I'm not sure about most denominations.
Think about this. Whatever you think about free will, maybe humans have it, maybe we don't, but whatever you think about free will, certainly theists think that God has it, right? God is able to make decisions. But if you know the future, you can't have free will. If you know your own future decisions, they are fixed and they're unchangeable. If the future is fixed and unchangeable in your own mind, you don't have the ability or any period of indeterminacy for you to say, oh, wait, I'm going to change my mind. If you did change your mind, then you were not omniscient in the first place. Something's got to give. There's a whole bunch of incompatible properties that define certain types of gods.
We see in the Bible several places where God changes his mind. In fact, several mortals do it. Moses up on top of the mountain with the 10 Commandments and whatnot. After the golden idol fiasco, Moses goes back up and Yahweh's like, oh, I'm going to smite them all, these stiff-necked people. And Moses goes, Lord, 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 don't do that. And Yahweh's like, who are you to tell me what to do? And Moses goes, what will the other gods think? You've gone to all this trouble to bring them up out of Egypt, and you just smite them now. The other gods will harass you until the end of time over it. And Yahweh's like, yeah, you're right. You know what? I'm only going to plague some of them. That will make my point. So God changes his mind because he's out-reasoned by Moses because of what the other gods will think. It's a fucking phenomenal story.
Well, the apologetic that's been launched at me for that one has been, well, God was always not going to smite them, and he said that so Moses would object, and then he already knew that he was going to change his mind. The problem there means that God lied, because he said, I am going to do this. And if he wasn't going to do it, then God intentionally lied to Moses in order to get him to object. So you've got another problem on top, that God can just lie outright whenever he wants.
Yeah, like that other time when the Sodom and Gomorrah thing was going down, and Yahweh's walking around. He comes across Abraham on his way into town, and he's like, hey, Abraham, I've heard these rumors about all these sinners in this town up ahead, this Sodom place. They're doing some real nasty shit. I don't know. I've only heard rumors, so I have to go look for myself, right? And if it's what I hear, if it's as bad as they say, I'm gonna smite them, some bitches. And Abraham's like, but my cousin lives in the city, Lord, you can't do that. And Lord's like, dude, you telling me what I can't do, you mortal? How dare you mortal? And he's like, listen, would you destroy the city and wipe out 50 righteous people along with it? Isn't it worth leaving the city alone for the sake of 50 righteous people? And Yahweh goes, I suppose it would be. I will change my mind and I will spare the city for the sake of 50 people. And I don't know how many people there are because I haven't gone and looked yet. But for you, my devoted servant, I will take this under consideration and do as you have suggested instead of what I intended to do. And then Abraham says, but what if there's only 40? Would you kill those 40 for the lack of 10? And they continue like this. He continues negotiating with God. It gets him to change his mind several more times.
Don't you know that God's basically a used car salesman? You can just negotiate them down, kind of thing. That's essentially how it works.
Yes.
Maybe that's why so many apologists are used car salesmen.
It's tough,
Donnie.
But I just love these kinds of apologetics where the excuse is God knew ahead of time,
right?
And then they also say the Bible is inerrant. The Bible says this shit.
Yeah.
Christian God, that if that's the God you're arguing for, that God not only does not exist, but that God cannot exist. It'd be like having a debate over the existence of married bachelors. Well, it's not a debate. Such a thing cannot exist. And many of the ways the Christian God is defined simply cannot logically exist.
And this is why the precepts like Matt Slick and all of those other, they don't want to talk about the Bible. They don't want to talk about the Christian God. They don't want to talk about any of that stuff because it is too ridiculous to sort of actually, debate on the merits of the Bible, the God described by the Bible, because it's kind of nonsensical.
The second absence, of course, is the absence of evidence. And Matt has proposed some evidence tonight, which are actually non-evidences, and I'll talk about them in my rebuttal. If there were actually evidence for a God, real evidence, in the sense that we would call, and just calling it scientific isn't ruling out transcendence, by the way, because transcendence is not the same as supernatural. There might be a transcendent world that's not supernatural or that's not a God. Scientists haven't closed their minds to the transcendent. In fact, if there's a multiverse, the multiverse is transcendent of the universe that we live within. It's part of the natural world.
Exactly.
But
how come is it that Dan Barker understands what transcendent means and Matt Slick doesn't? That he's like, if it covers all of space and time, then it's transcendent. No, it's not. It's just universal. That's what universal means.
Because
transcendent means beyond space and time.
Because Matt only has a master's degree.
In divinity. Yeah, okay. I walked right into that one, didn't I?
Yeah. I love the call. I love callbacks. It's so great. I feel almost Amy Newman-esque with the jokes tonight. I mean, I'm not on Amy's level by any stretch of the imagination, but we do our best here. But
we do.
It's so funny to me, the irony of Matt going on and on about the laws of logic when here's Dan just simply saying the God in the Bible defies the laws of logic.
Right.
So what are you talking about, my guy?
Yeah.
If there were evidence for a God, it would be on the table. Matt would have put it right there. In fact, by now, somebody would have won the Nobel Prize for pointing out the existence of a hitherto unknown force in the cosmos. Look at this. Any scientist in the world, we have some science students here. Wouldn't that be something? I mean, are you sticking your head in the sand? Nope, there's no God. No, I don't want to. If you could find it, if you could show, for example, that prayer actually worked better, if you could actually have evidence that the Bible means what it says when it says, all things whatsoever you shall ask for in my name, believing you shall receive. Or is any sick among you, let them call the elders and anoint their head with oil and bring them in the prayer of faith will heal the sick. If there were any kind of that evidence, the Bible actually telling the truth, then that would be on the table and somebody's going to win the Nobel Prize for that. I mean, that would be incredible. If I were a scientist, I'd love to prove that.
Yeah, why don't faith healers work hospitals?
Yeah, I was thinking something along a very different line. When Kepler proposed the idea that what we now call gravity might be a force similar to magnets, it was totally new. This concept that it could be a force, mind-blowing. Right. The church not only never came up with it, but actively fought against it. Like they went so far as to send inquisitors after his mother.
Wow.
To try to get to this guy. Like they were so against this. I mean, they locked up Galileo for something similar,
Yeah,
a little
yeah.
bit lower scale. And they burned Bruno, but we don't talk about Bruno. It
Bruno,
just,
yeah. Poor Bruno, yeah.
yeah, to say that any of this shit comes from, it was revealed by God.
Yeah.
The people who claim revelation tried to oppose this as hard as they could, you know?
And I might add, these are the people with a direct line to the all-knowing master of the universe. And basically, they have not come up with one original fact about our reality in 2000 years. Like, what have they actually told us about the way the universe around us works in the last 2000 years? But it's scientists doing that with simply one methodology or a series of methodologies. And on the other side, you have people who claim to have a direct line to somebody that knows everything, and they can't discover a damn thing.
They can't
Why
even
not?
agree on the shit that's been revealed. They fight
Well,
literal
that's true.
wars over it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's baffling. Like, so why are you claiming you have this knowledge? You obviously don't. Because you don't know as much as the physicist sitting next to you. And he doesn't claim to have a direct line to the all-knowing master of the universe. He's just got what we've figured out over time.
You know, the thing about physicists, there actually is
Yeah.
something akin to supernatural revelation in the sciences, because whenever you hear a sound, you're, in a manner of speaking, listening to the particles. Because of the way sound works, it's a concussion wave through a medium like air.
Yeah, no, I get you. It's just but also you're not, like, I notice that tinnitus, for instance, it isn't anything wrong with your ears, it's the auditory nerve. So apparently in the past they had, like, severed the link to the ear in order to cure tinnitus, but all it did was remove any other sound but the tinnitus. And it's just, oh no, that's awful, because it's like the nerve messing up, not any physical problem with the ear.
Yeah,
So it's
it's
like,
a
wow,
false
okay,
positive
that's
signal.
wild. Yeah.
Fortunately, it was temporary. It was the result of an ear infection. It was putting pressure
Right.
on one of the nerves or another, and I was getting a false
Yeah.
positive signal. But like, even trying to sleep with that shit because like with light, you can close your eyes. You can't turn off your ears. It is
Right.
it's a potential avenue of torture. It's
Mhm.
it's not the most painful thing ever.
Ugh.
In fact, it's not painful in any normal sense of the word.
Bloody annoying. Yeah, I could imagine.
It's wild how bad it is.
I don't think I've ever had, like, tinnitus or anything like that. I don't think I ever have. Maybe like short term, like, kind of thing, a loud noise or something, but I don't,
Well, you can have temporary tinnitus, like what people describe as it's not the same as ringing in your ears, but it's
ringing in
kind
your
of like
ears, yeah.
that. Like you'll hear one harmonic note. It'll just or something. It'll be like one frequency. And you'll hear it for a few minutes and then it'll be gone. And it'll happen maybe a couple of times a year throughout your entire life.
Right. Yeah.
It happens to everybody though. What's happening there is the little the cilia in the spiral, goddammit, in your inner ear that actually picks up the sounds, that each one detects a specific frequency. When the cell that produces that cilia dies, it creates a false positive signal because it's a change, and that's what nerves pick up on, is change. When it dies, it sends a positive signal, and it takes the brain a few minutes to realize that's a bad signal and filter it out. So when you hear that noise, that's the last time you're ever going to hear that specific frequency from that specific ear, because that cell is dead now.
Bugger. Okay.
There's your cheerful thought for the day.
Oh wow, no, the swan song of your ear frequencies.
Yeah,
That's
and we
fantastic.
can test this too. Like we know from doing hearing tests that a person's hearing is at maximum sometime around age 16, and after that, it gradually diminishes. Like a 50-year-old man has lost a good chunk of the upper range of their frequency. It's, yeah.
Mhm. Well, I know there's frequencies that Lynn hears that I don't. So, I'm an old man compared to her, apparently. So,
I mean, compared to her,
yeah, compared to most people. Okay, let's just say that.
Yes, Mark is secretly 300 years old. No one knows.
Absolutely. Yeah. I come from a long line from Noah or something. I don't remember how long Noah lived for.
None. There's nothing. There's zero. You notice when you debate, they bring up little things like fulfilled prophecy, maybe, or some miracle from some anecdote. But when you scratch beneath the surface, you see that it's usually random chance or confirmation bias. And what it comes down to is faith. The Bible is real big on faith, and the book that Matt is arguing for is the book that's pro-faith. But suppose, for example, the Higgs boson was a hypothesis, just like neutrinos were a hypothesis that were later confirmed by observation. Suppose before the Higgs boson had been discovered, scientists were getting together every Sunday morning in a circle like this. Yes, the Higgs boson is real. I know the Higgs boson is real. I will have faith. I will not waver. I will resist the secular world. I know the Higgs boson is real. The God particle is real. Amen. If they did that every Sunday,
God particle.
Yeah. And hallelujah, they found it. It's a miracle.
It has been revealed.
Yeah. Actually, I had a discussion with somebody that I was sort of saying, he was sort of saying, oh, but I pray for things and then they come true. And it's like, do you pray for everything that you want? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. It works. So, and it's like, then of course, like is there stuff that you don't get? Yeah, of course there's stuff I don't get. God can't just give you everything. And it's like, well, wait a second. If you pray for everything that you want and you get some of the stuff that you want and some of it you don't, how the hell is that a miracle? Especially as there's people out there not praying and they get some of the stuff they want and some of the stuff doesn't. Like,
how do you tell the difference? Now, what if you get something that you want but you didn't pray for?
Well, that would be a control experiment. You just wouldn't pray for stuff and see if things happen anyway.
I know. It's such a wild thing. It's like, do you want children with cancer to get better? Have you tried praying for them? And has it worked?
Has it worked? Well, there's that passage in the Bible that says when like 2 or more Christians come together and pray, they will get what they want. And it's like, nobody prayed for child malaria. Nobody. Like, come on, guys.
Smallpox.
Get together.
Tooth infections.
Well, smallpox we kind of eradicated, but I'm damn well sure it wasn't through prayer.
Not prayer, no.
Right now. No, it was vaccines. It's actually cowpox that they found it was similar to. So they made a vaccine out of cowpox.
They did it a couple of different ways. There was there's a whole freaking deep rabbit hole of stuff. TLDR.
I love rabbit holes.
There was before there was a vaccine, they did inoculations, right? And they would take smallpox victims and then they do diluted, weakened, and so forth, and deliberately infect people with a weakened version so that they would get sick and then develop a resistance, but it was weak, so they would survive and shit. And it was super effective. But because the know-how to do that came from African physicians who were enslaved and brought to the US, the white people in the US didn't want to do it. They were like, this is African medical technology. I'm having no part in it. And it led to this whole freaking thing that eventually became, Wakefield notwithstanding, the general anti-vax sentiment that exists today. It's racism all the way down, back to George Washington's time.
Holy crap. Even though we've eliminated virtually, like I think there's probably a few samples stashed away, like in case we need it again. But essentially, we wiped out smallpox. We wiped it out.
Miracle.
Incredible. Oh yeah, miracle. Well, I mean, I've often said like Jesus cured one leper through, just penicillin. We've cured leprosy entirely. So who's the miracle worker? Why couldn't Jesus just do away with leprosy altogether? We did it.
Right. Like
he's supposed to be an all-powerful God. Like, why can't he do it?
Yeah, why, if Jesus can just forgive sins like he did to that one dude in Matthew that he told to go make a sacrifice at a priest because he wasn't a priest and couldn't receive sin. He forgave that guy's sins. If he can just forgive sins, why did he need to die? And if the whole point was to die to forgive all sins, why did he bother to forgive that one guy?
Right. Like, wait a few days. He would have got caught up in the mass forgiveness. It's like that guy had an early bird special or something. I don't know.
It was very time sensitive, and only specifically. Everybody else who died between then and the following Friday or whatever, fuck them.
Together to bolster up their faith. You would think they were pretty insecure on the concept, but that's exactly what happens in the churches that Matt goes through. That's what happens in Sunday mornings. They're getting together to bolster their faith, to believe in spite of the lack of evidence. There is no good evidence for a God. Or if you think there is, it's the kind of evidence that Lucky Charms is for leprechauns. I mean, it's stories, it's myth making, and we can explain all those in natural terms. Another lack is the lack of a good argument for a God. And there are about a dozen arguments that apologists and theologians have brought forth, and Matt raised two of them tonight, a presuppositionalist argument and a cosmological argument. And to some degree, a moral argument.
Yeah, some degree. That was very clumsily tacked on the end, right? That was incredibly clumsily tacked on the end, that moral argument. That was a real gear shift, to be honest with you. Was not great. It more resembled just sort of poisoning the well, saying, well, atheists don't have objective morals. Okay. So what? How does that prove a God exists or doesn't exist? I don't get it. I mean, a God could exist and he just doesn't give a crap about morals.
It's true. Or he could be the opposite. He could be, you know, like the God of the Bible, where he's telling people to go smash babies on rocks and whatnot.
Right.
He could be.
Well, in fairness, that is Psalms, which is sort of poetic writings.
Yes,
but
David's poems. But I mean, it's all inerrant, and it's the inspired word of God, apparently.
The surface and unpack these arguments, most of them end up begging the question. Most of them end up turning back around on themselves. For example, Matt didn't put design on the table tonight, he put cosmology, but Richard Dawkins points out, and many others have pointed out, that any person or thing that's capable of designing something that's complex, say you're a watchmaker, say you're designing stuff, anything that can design something like a watch has to be at least as complex as the thing that it's designing. So if functional complexity requires a designer, then the mind of the designer requires a designer. If the mind of the designer doesn't, then jettison your argument. You don't need it. You've already begged the question. You've already assumed the existence of this thing that you're trying to then kind of back argue through some kind of cosmological design arguments. Most of them end up coming back around and begging the question. In philosophy, the term begging the question just is another way of saying circular logic. It's when you bring your conclusion into the premise.
Yeah, it is a form of circular argument. That is correct. And it's basically it's basically starting with the conclusion in your premises. So the tag argument, the transcendent argument for God that Matt Slick used, it is begging the question. It's basically transcendents are created by God. Well, you've got God in the premises, and that's your conclusion. It's begging the question.
And in arguments like cosmology and design, the premise is saying things like everything except God needs to be designed, therefore there's a God. Well, you can see the illogic in that. Ontological arguments have fallen flat. Bertrand Russell said that when he was a teenager, he was briefly convinced of the existence of God by the ontological argument. And then he woke up the next morning and he said, it's all just bad grammar. When you think about the words, you're trying to prove God with just words rather than observation, like Matt's trying to do tonight. No observation, no evidence, nothing testable, just words. When you try to do that, it turns into like a mind game. And during my rebuttal, I'll show you the mind game that Matt is playing when it comes to these logical presuppositionalist things. Another lack is the lack of an agreement among God believers. If there really is a God, there really is this being who created us and cares about us and loves us, don't you think he'd be careful enough to make himself known to us in a very clear way? In the first chapter of 1 Corinthians, you know that verse where Paul tells Christians, Matt, let there be no divisions among you. You should be of one mind. And then later in Corinthians, he says, for God is not the author of confusion. Can you think of a single book that's caused more confusion than the Bible? They fight with each other. They disagree with each other. Strangely, Paul didn't tell us which person you should follow so that there should be no division. I suppose he was talking about John Calvin, who knows. But Christians fight with each other. They don't agree with each other about the nature of a God. They've had splits and schisms. Even in the very early church, there were at least 8 or 10 different types of nature of Jesus divisions and fights amongst each other, which were very fierce. People were getting killed over that. And of course, Protestants and Catholics, the 30 Years' War is one example, which started for a lot of reasons, but primarily because of the confessional differences like infant baptism and transubstantiation and stuff, these doctrines that they think were so important. Christians can't get their act together. They don't even know what this God is they're arguing for, and especially when it comes to moral principles. Matt talks about moral absolutes, but you can't name a single issue in society that we're struggling with. You can't name one issue on which good, church-going, loving Christian families who read the Bible and pray are not marching on both sides. Think about it. Women's rights, birth control, abortion rights, gay marriage, gun.
Yeah, I saw a Christian channel the other day. It was like had the cross and had peace, and then they had guns afterwards, and it's like, yeah,
What?
yeah, it was fascinating. It was absolutely fascinating. It was like some kind of reaction channel or something, and they were like, big cross and peace, guns, and I'm just like, how do you not?
The gun is the cult peacemaker, perhaps.
Right, like it's just, I don't know, really weird. Like you'd think if you want peace, you'd want less of the guns, but apparently not. Apparently all guns do, like they're it's not an assault rifle, it's a peace rifle. They just shoot peace all over the place. Yeah.
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 You work for the Ministry of Peace on behalf of the Ministry of Love, spreading love
Yes.
through your peace device all over
Yes.
every country with oil.
Control. What are some other issues that we're fighting with? The war, climate change, doctor-assisted suicide, you name it. All of these social issues that are supposedly have moral absolutes from his book, there is no moral absolute. Good people are on both sides. Good church-going, Bible-believing people are disagreeing with each other on these issues that are supposedly being guided by their God. There's no agreement. The lack of agreement among believers is a serious problem for the belief in the God, and not just within Christianity, but over the entire world. Matt, you guys get your act together first, and then come back to us and tell us about this clear-headed, all-loving, moral being that you are pretending to worship. Another laugh, of course, is a good reply to the problem of evil.
Jeez, he's not pulling his punches, is he? That you're pretending to worship. Your imaginary friend over there. Wow. Robin ducking in with the one readership. Who'd you hit? Jeff C. Actually, Jeff was in the chat earlier. Is Jeff still in the chat? Jeff, you are chosen.
I thought Jeff had to go. We did the toodaloo to Jeff, and you were hitting every other comment, but
you are the chosen one. You might be lurking or working. Who knows?
Did he pray for it? Did he get it because he prayed for it?
I don't know. Maybe. He prayed for Robin to favor him. And his prayer was answered.
That makes Robin the angel of a redemption.
Wow, that's terrible. That's terrible, and I love it. Redemption. Read Dead Redemption. Yeah, nice. Nice.
And theologians admit that's the Achilles heel in theology, the problem of evil. If, and this has to do with the characteristics of the deity, if God is a good God, and in most Christian theology, God is benevolent.
Watch out, Dan. Calvinists may not agree with that. They may say, hey, God does evil stuff, and that's tough. Calvinists are a bit weird like that. But if God does evil things and they say they get morality from God, then why should we listen to what the Calvinists say that we should do? Because what they're saying isn't moral. It is just what God wants. So, yeah, he did say most. You're right, Andrew. He did say most. That's true.
God is a good God. He wants what is good. If God is a good God, then the problem of evil is a serious problem towards the existence of that God. Of course, God might be a bad God. He might be an evil God, which might explain a lot. There might be a God, but he just doesn't give a what about us. He's going to say, I want you to pray to me, but I'm going to ignore you. I would ask you, Matt, don't answer it now, but if you had known on 9/11 what was in the mind of those hijackers, if you had seen those Christian families in the Twin Towers with families that they loved and kids that they cared about singing God Bless America on the National Day of Prayer, asking for God's blessing for our country to protect us. If you had known what was in the mind of those hijackers, and at no risk to yourself, if you could have stopped them from crashing those planes, would you have done it? Yeah, I would too. So you're nicer than God. God knew about it, God could have done it, but he did nothing. And in my mind, he's an accomplice. If such a God does exist, he's an evil God.
I think Dan should have gone to the Nazi thing that he brought up, that God not only allowed the Nazis to do what they did, he also allowed them to wander around saying God with us on their belts. So why? And the first person to endorse the mustache man was the papacy. Yeah, Catholic Church.
And it's fascinating to me how, if you look across the last couple thousand years of history, since almost a couple thousand years since the Catholic Church got real power, at every social issue, when the Catholic Church takes an initial stand, every single time they're on the wrong side of it, until a few generations later, and they get dragged over to the other side.
Yep. And then they're playing catch up. And, you know, the Catholic Church has had a long history of doing very bad things to children. And people will go, oh, the rates are similar to what happens in schools, to what happens here. And yes, but they weren't complicit in trying to cover it up. That's the difference. This is supposed to be the mouthpiece of a God who helped cover up those atrocities. Seriously? And then they want to talk about how they've got the moral high ground. No, you have no moral high ground here.
And to be clear, it's not just the Catholics. The Catholics are infamous for it. They're notorious for it because they've been caught so many times and had to pay out so much money in so many lawsuits. But remember, the Southern Baptists lost so many lawsuits over exactly this, that they had to sell their Nashville headquarters to pay the legal fees, not even to pay the victims, to pay the legal fees. And the Jehovah's Witnesses, they've had to sell off real estate. The Mormon Church, even though they literally have more money than God, they've lost shit tons of it. Every freaking Christian denomination you can think of, they not only have predators, they have protected the predators at the expense of the victims.
He's an accomplice to the crime. 2 minutes, perfect. So the problem of evil, I say this a lot, but it's still true. All you have to do is walk into any children's hospital, and you know there's no God. Those families are praying for their kids. They love them just as much. It's a tragedy what's happening. But those kids, no matter who they are, die at the same random rate. God is silent. Prayers are not answers. There's no evidence for a God. And the problem of evil at least eliminates the possibility of a good God. And then finally, there's no need for a God. Millions of good people. In this country, tens of millions of good people live happy, productive, meaningful, moral, loving lives without believing in some transcendent spook or ghost or being up there.
And that's not even going overseas, where the majority of the population is secular. It's not Christian at all. They're either agnostic or atheist or, you know, whatever you want to say, no religion. And
the nuns.
They live perfectly happy, healthy, productive lives that are moral, and in some ways a lot more moral than the US, with a lot less crime. You know, I'm looking at you, Scandinavia, and your excellent social, you know, safety nets. And we keep getting told, oh, you need God, or it just falls into chaos and disorder and people doing whatever they want, but it doesn't. So if there is this morality provided by God, why can people have perfectly functioning moral societies without it? Explain that one to me.
To give us our meaning and our joy and our purpose. We find it within the natural world. We feel, most of us atheists and agnostics, and I don't speak for all, you know, atheism is not like a creed. In fact, atheists welcome disagreement, and we're not going to fight to the death over these things. But I think most atheists and agnostics agree that meaning doesn't have to be ultimate and absolute.
There was a subtle jab. I don't know if Dan even intended it that way or if it was just coincidental, but the fact that he mentioned the other denominations doing holy wars, like the 30 Years' War and shit, over their disagreements over doctrine, and then to turn around and say, well, you know, we atheists, we're going to disagree. We're not going to fight to the death over it. He may have just been using a colloquialism, but it's really striking the distinction, because we don't fight to the death over these. Like,
Yes.
you know, we know another person. I don't know if you'd technically call her atheist per se, because she believes that the universe is an aware organic entity sort of deal. Jen from I forget her channel. It's not super important. The point is, we both don't believe in the Christian God.
Right.
We're not going to fight to the death over our differences,
Right.
you know?
Because we're not claiming to have absolute morality. So if someone's got different ideas on morality, we discuss it, but we don't say, hey, mine is absolute and unquestioning, inerrant in every way, and has to be obeyed under the pain of death, or the pain of torture, or the pain of sinful annihilation. You know, we don't take these stances. You know, so we don't have to fight to the death that you follow exactly what I say because it's absolute, because we don't believe in that absoluteness. That somebody doing something, I can say, hey, this isn't good for society, it isn't good for this person, it's good. We can discuss it. And that's the problem of Christianity. And, you know, every single one of these denominations think they've got the correct one, the very correct one, and it has to be obeyed. It ends in fighting. Like I've often said, like, yeah, okay, so you know, any Christian denomination, they should be in favor of a secular government. Because when the Christian denomination gets in to power, no other Christian denomination is going to accept it. Do you think the Eastern Orthodox with their patriarchs is going to accept, you know, a papacy like representative in there, or a Protestant No, of course not. Because they will start giving their absolute morality that will conflict with everybody else's. Oh, you've got to worship in this way, you've got to speak in tongues, or you've got to have a wafer with communion. And then they will just fight. That's all that will happen. But we don't need to do that. We don't need to do that. You know, someone can say, hey, I want to meditate upon the spirituality of Brahma. And I can say, cool, doesn't affect me at all. You go for it. Christians can't do that. They don't do that. Oh boy, don't they do that.
Aggressively so, famously.
Uh-huh. We're in a war, don't you know, Ember? We're in a war.
It's always a war. Oh, that's
Yeah.
several layers of
I know.
things in
I
that one
know.
too. But it's always a war with these fucking people.
Yeah, I know. It's because they want to implement their version of morality under any circumstances. And so anybody that says, hey, we're not accepting your morality as normative for society, they see it as an attack on them. And that's a problem, because I'm not looking for exact, like you having my moral standards. I'm just looking for having compatibility, you know, that we both essentially want the same things. And that's true for most humans, you know, like, oh, you want to have communion? I don't care. You go and play your body of Christ stuff. It doesn't really worry me. I'm not too fussed. But, you know, you start to say, hey, this trans person is not allowed to exist. Yeah, then we got problems. Then we have issues, right? Then you're basically trying to tell other people how to live. It's none of your fucking business. Excuse me.
Violence.
Violence!
To be meaningful. Just because something doesn't last forever doesn't mean it has no value. Suppose you were planning a vacation in the next couple of weeks. You're looking forward to it. What are you going to do? You're going to go skiing or hiking or visiting friends, or you're going to, whatever, you're going to enjoy your vacation. But then you realize, oh, wait a minute. When my vacation is over, I'm going to have to go back to work. I may as well not go. Is that what you would say? You would go on the vacation. It doesn't have to be eternal. It doesn't have to be ultimate. It doesn't have to be absolute to have value. And that's how we, atheists and agnostics, realize you don't need the eternal, the ultimate, the absolute. We can find meaning and joy here within the local context of the world in which we do live. For all of these reasons, and many more, which I'll talk about during rebuttal, the lack of belief in a God is a rationally justifiable position.
Thank you, Dan.
Nice, Dan. Yeah, I think you know, I mean, the precept. The problem is that a lot of people that have never engaged with sort of their style before don't understand what the hell a precept's talking about. You know, unless you know what transcendentals are, unless you know what absolute morals are, he hasn't really explained a lot. And I think Dan really struck him on that. You haven't even defined a god, right? Like, you've said, oh, it's the Christian God, but even Christians don't agree on that. Is it a triune God, like Father, Son, Holy Spirit? Because not all Christians believe in that.
Mm-hmm.
It
And that's it. If he does believe in that, that's another conflict with logic.
Right.
It violates the law of identity right out of the gate.
Yeah. Yeah, and sort of, is it a omnipotent God? Is it a maximally powerful God? Is it if it's omnibenevolent or maximally benevolent, then you've got to address the problem of evil, because you cannot have a maximally benevolent God that causes earthquakes and famines and drought and all of this stuff. Even if you want to plead to, well, people do bad things, God doesn't stop it because he allows free will. Even if you want to plead that, it doesn't cover why babies get malaria, because God would have had to design it that way, to make it that way. When he was going, well, let's design all the creatures. Oh, I'm going to design this virus that attacks the most vulnerable among humans and, kills them for no reason. Why not?
It's
What the
designed
hell is that?
mosquitoes to spread diseases faster.
Right. It's ridiculous. And then that's not even to mention Alex O'Connor's sort of animals in evolutionary process, being absolutely tortured and going extinct and all of this stuff, But I mean, I don't know if Matt Slick believes in evolution, which is crazy, because he tried to appeal to science for God kind of thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of, again, several things. To keep it short, the fact that him saying I'm a Christian doesn't come with a prepackaged bundle of beliefs.
Right.
He could believe anything about a vast array of things. It's wild.
Yeah, I mean, it's like if you call somebody an atheist, doesn't come with prepackaged beliefs either. There's a great many beliefs that people will have in the atheist camp.
Right, but to
very
say
wide.
the Christian worldview, what does that mean? Because there's so many things that are not defined by that. It isn't a cohesive worldview. You have your own worldview, and Christianity is an element of it. There is no such thing as the Christian worldview.
Well, I feel like when they say the Christian worldview, they're kind of in their mind talking about their denomination of Christianity and what they believe within their sort of subcategory of Christian, right? Like that's the way that I feel like they're talking, because they will sort of say, hey, the Christian traditions and the Christian worldview, well, what does that entail? Oh, well, Christians believe this, this, and this, but it's not all Christians they're talking about. It's the true Christians, they're Christians. That is the Christian worldview. So I find a lot of that stuff happens, that when you drill down, when they're saying the Christian worldview, they mean their Christian worldview and not any other Christian worldview kind
And
of
they're
thing.
all objectively true and revealed by the divine creator. Everybody else got the wrong message. It was the lying spirits, folks. The Bible prophesied this. But I'm sure mine is true, because I felt the touch, the special touch of
they've gone
Jesus
astray.
man.
They've gone astray, but not us. And from an outside perspective, newsflash, we don't know who's the correct Christian beliefs and we don't think any of you are right. So stop asking us to justify that your particular denomination is the real Christians, because we're not going to make that distinction. Christians are just all of the different people claiming to be Christians. So, to us, you're all identically wrong. We agree with
Yeah.
all of you. You're all wrong. Like, you
Yes.
think they're wrong. They think you're wrong. We agree with all of you. We think you're all wrong. So, yeah.
Do you suppose that's why they hyper focus on atheists so much? Like it's the Christian worldview versus the atheist worldview. They think that like the first one of them who can actually defeat an atheist, that's like the proof their Christianity is the true Christianity. Like they
I
all
don't know.
agreed in a back room, we're gonna debate
No,
the atheists, and whoever can beat Dan Barker has the truth.
Yeah. Yeah. Is the chosen one. The one who can actually beat Dan Barker is the chosen one. Look, Dan Barker is a different kind. Hi, Kip. How you doing? Dan Barker is a different kind of cringe. He's like a dad joke kind of cringe, you know. Just yeah. I do like him. He seems like a really nice guy. Matt Slick sounds like a very pompous, loud. Yeah, I don't know. He comes off as being way too serious in one of these debates, kind of thing. You know, crack a smile once in a while, mate. You know, establish some rapport with the audience or something. Don't just
Yeah.
complain about your throat all the time. Yeah, I mean, I did like Dan Barker's sort of introduction. I don't like these were so different in their approaches though, and obviously Dan Barker hasn't got to getting to his Matt Slick's intro and how he does on a sort of presuppositional level will be interesting. But as he pointed out, there was nothing there. There was just a whole bunch of claims like transcendentals are given by God because they don't work in the atheist worldview. Well, they do. They 100% do. Like what you call transcendentals, we're just saying, hey, they're just the way the universe is. That's it. Like, do we need a reason why they're like that? Because you're not giving a reason. You're saying God made them like that. Well, why? He just decided to.
Mysterious ways.
Mysterious ways, right? It's not a reason as to why they're like that. You're just basically, I think Matt Delahunty used to say, like, you're just solving a mystery by appealing to a bigger mystery.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't actually give you an explanation. It's just an excuse to say why we don't know.
It's an infinite regress of mysteries.
Right. But the funny thing is when you say to these people, hey, you don't know why they're like that either, they'll say, yeah, but God does. It's like, could you beg the question any harder? Like, could you make assumptions any harder? Like the stuff that hasn't been demonstrated. Hasn't been demonstrated to be a God. Very, very silly. He does a daily call-in show. Really? Does he take Australians calling in? Does he take Australians calling? That might be actually funny. Anyway, so what did you think, Ems? I thought it was really, really good. Really good.
It was a lot of fun. We went on so many wild tangents, and there were plenty more we could have done. So I hope y'all appreciate our restraint to get the openings finished in a single episode.
Well, it just Matt Slick's so baffling. Like it's you know, I know that precepts are like this. I know they are, but at the same time, damn, like at least try to present something that resembles some kind of argument for your worldview instead of presenting against somebody else's. You know what I mean? Like you're just basically saying, well, yours doesn't work. That isn't supporting your worldview. It could be a third worldview that's, you know.
It's the seeds of the precepts that we see today, right? It's that,
Right,
well,
right.
I don't have to prove mine because of the impossibility of the contrary.
Right. Yeah, that was baffling.
Mm-hmm.
That was baffling. Well, yeah, and next week we shall return, but we will be on Ember's channel to do part 2, I presume.
That's right. I do still have a channel, don't I?
Still have a channel. What have I been watching this
I'm
time
teasing.
then?
I've been losing subscribers for a couple of weeks straight, so I'm just like, oh yeah, there's still a channel.
You're almost up to 2K. Like you're on the verge of
going
greatness.
backwards again.
Look, I don't believe that for a second. I think you're going to grow. I think you're going to grow, and I'm prepared to bet on it. I'm going to presuppose
Maybe
your growth
someday.
will be transcendent.
Maybe if I stop putting out content, because it seems like every time I release a video, whoop, wrong direction. It's freaking wild. But yeah, find my channel, Better Than Ember, here on YouTube. All my
You
links on
don't have to
betterthanember.com.
find it.
I do a
It's
bunch
in
of
the
other stuff too.
chat. You
Yeah,
don't have to find it. It's in the chat. It's in the description. It's in the title. It's everywhere. You should go and subscribe
I am
right now and get
omnipresent.
Ember to 2K. That would be awesome.
It would be nice. I mean, I wanted to get 1K as like my initial goal on YouTube, because like there's a whole lot of backstory, but that was like a goal, and we did it. Hooray. And so forth.
Maybe Maya said she lost some time. Maybe the algorithm did some kind of, like, I've heard from some larger channels that occasionally they will like purge old subscriptions, and people that watch it all the time get caught up in it as well for some reason. You know, the
It's been
YouTube
known to
gods
happen.
do not divulge to us for some reason. I don't know, but I don't know. That's possible. That is possible.
I know sometimes, you know, people's accounts get deleted and their subscriptions get wiped when they hit. There's a bunch of different things. I mean, it's nothing like last year when people were like, "Oh, you're doing this now. Unsubscribe." You know, it's
right. Yeah.
That was a whole thing. But it is a little disheartening that.
Oh, Dr. Kid hit 20K. Congratulations,
Hey,
mate.
sweet.
That's awesome. Yeah, good work. That's amazing.
That means you have to have a party. It's in the YouTube terms of service. You check.
And it has to be in Australian time. No, I'm joking. It's fine. I'm upside down. I accept it. I've missed out on a couple of things lately. Simos's State of the Onion I missed out on because it was like 5 a.m. for me, and I'm like, no, damn my other side of worldness. But that's okay. It's okay. It's all right. It's totally cool. But yeah, what have you got coming up, Ems? Are you just doing stuff off and on? You know, or are you just sort of putting up stuff whenever you feel like it?
Yeah, it's intermittent. Like I said, I've been discouraged on making most of the content. I tried to do a different kind of live show, and that went really badly. I don't know. I'll do something again at some point, but mostly I've been focused on IRL stuff. I mean, I have 5 freaking jobs to deal with as it is, and when I do have free time, instead of sitting down and saying, I need to pre-record a video, I'm like, you know, I should go outside and play with the damn flowers, you know. So
yeah,
little self-care.
Hey, that's
kind of
cool.
Stuff. Yeah.
You should do. Are those the flowers in your hat at the moment?
Lilacs, yeah. Yeah,
Should
I actually made this one myself because I couldn't find one. Like most of these things, I'm like, oh, the cherry blossoms make me so happy. So I get a flower crown of the cherry blossoms and then I put it on my hats. I couldn't find one for lilacs. So it's another really long story. So to shorten it for broadcast purposes, I tracked down the parts and made my own. Now there's lilacs, which are my freaking favorite. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Well, I've got on Tuesday night Eastern time or Wednesday real time, Australian time, where time is, look, my continent's
Future
older than yours. Like, my continent is older than yours, so I was here first, technically. That's correct. Australia was here first, all right? It definitely was. So yeah, so I've got Aimbot, which has been tons of fun lately. It's been awesome. So many great people dropping by. Absolutely love it. Michael Jones is currently in Australia. I have not seen him. That's interesting, though. That is interesting.
It's the philosophical hiddenness problem.
Yeah. It's more like nobody ever comes to my city because it's just in the middle of nowhere. But what was I going to say? What, isn't he inspiring philosophy or something? Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
And I've got Fundamentalist Fails, and the member stream is this week. So come along if you're a member on Wednesday night or Thursday morning, real time, and just have a chat and a hangout, and yeah, just chill. But thank you so much for joining us, everybody. We will be back. Ember's channel is in the description. Please do go subscribe, ring the bell for next week's episode. Always remember, be kind to yourself. Be kind to each other. And we'll see you in the next one.
Doodles.
Bye-bye.
This old switchboard could talk. Wow. Your ears would sizzle. 1880. We take Alexander Graham Bell's invention for granted today. Perhaps we should. But isn't it incredible that millions and millions of people can talk simultaneously to practically any spot on Earth?